Push some books. 1. I became the Queen's cloud support boyfriend. Zhao Xian has been a group performer in Hengyan for 8 years, and he has always been like a salted fish. Suddenly one day he found that some big-name female stars had changed their attitude towards him, and even took the initiative to know him. On the other hand, many female stars in China suddenly found themselves possessed by the system, and the tasks issued by the system were strange, all of which were to let the female stars contact a dragon-style actor named Zhao Xian. Some are doing a little favor, some are getting along with Zhao Xian, and some are even tasked with getting the female stars to establish a romantic relationship with Zhao Xian. Now Zhao Xian is cool. 2. Ancestors of the Wilderness joined the chat group at the start. As soon as Li Luo opened his eyes, he saw Nuwa making a man from Earth. And he was the first human race created by Nuwa, and was given the name Luo by Nuwa. Just when he was worried about how to survive and was at a loss, a chat group named Zhutian Wanjia sent him an invitation. Emperor Jianghu, I want the place where the sun shines to be the territory of our great Qin Empire. 100-year-old old saying. Overthrow the rule of barbarians, rebuild the universe, build a country with religion, and build a fairyland on Earth. Weird, please call me Valkyrie. Descendants of Nuwa. Wild hunter leader. 3. Journey to the West. The fourth calamity pushes the 3 realms across the world. When the blood bar lit up on the Buddha's head, the players took the equipment that exploded in the heavenly court and smashed to the Lingshan mountain in the west. Chen Xiu summoned the players to disguise themselves as monkeys in Huagua mountain, follow the Buddha's plan to fight monsters and level up, break into the dragon palace, make trouble in the underworld, brush through the heavens, and use the power of the 4th natural disaster to push the 3 realms across the world and wipe out the gods and Buddhas all over the sky. As long as you dare to brighten your health bar, there will be no bosses that players can't solve. Years later, when Tang Sanzang finally arrived in the West after a long period of 81 hardships, he found that the Dalian temple had long since become ruins. 4. Sword Chi painting Chang'an. I have 2 swords, one is called Qingming and the other is called Xiaoxua. Whether it is a human being or a Buddha, a demon or a demon, if I encounter injustice, I Han Pingji can be leveled with 2 swords. PS1. This book is also known as I've Been Killing Demons in Jianghu for 10 years. PS2. It is not pure cool text, the plot is the main and the cool point is supplemented. Chapter 1. Wuxia. Raging waves crashed on the shore rock of an island, and the seabirds on the reef fluttered their wings. This is an island shaped like a pair of gourds leaning against each other. There are 2 freshwater lakes, one large and one small, on the island, so it is also called Shuanghu Island. In addition to 2 freshwater lakes, there are vast plains and jungles on Shuanghu Island, as well as a majestic and continuous mountain range, the Copper Mountains. The 3rd level of Qi refining has finally broken through. In a cave house in the Red Copper Mountains, a young monk wearing a blue robe with a bun on his head, his face like a crown jade, and his eyes like stars opened his eyes and said excitedly. In front of the young cultivator, a spiritual eye with a diameter of 3 inches was gurgling out with spiritual energy. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian couldn't be bothered to be excited, and quickly used a stone plate engraved with patterns to carefully seal the spiritual eyes that were emitting spiritual energy. Qin Daoxian breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that his spiritual eyes were no longer emitting spiritual energy. This spiritual eye is the last spiritual eye of the Qin family, and it supports the only 2 monks in the Qin family to practice. Once the spiritual eyes are exhausted, Qin Daoxian and his 13th uncle Qin Xianhe can only refine the free aura in the air. At that time, their cultivation will inevitably be hindered, and it will be difficult for them to advance. After packing up, Qin Daoxian stood up and walked outside the cave. Just got out of the cave. A graceful maid, Xiang, trotted over with sweat dripping with sweat and called softly, "Young master, the patriarch, please come over." After speaking, the maid looked at Qin Daoxian with a look of awe on her pretty face. "Understood, you go down first." "Yes." After the maid left, Qin Daoxian used the wind-fighting technique and flew towards another mountain in the Qitong Mountains. Qin Daoxian is 16 years old this year. It has been 16 years since he came to this strange world. Qin Daoxian was a mechanical engineer in Earth China in his previous life. Because of a production accident, he was reborn into this world after his death. Because of the memory of his previous life, Qin Daoxian was really excited for a long time when he learned that this world was the world of immortal cultivation in the novels and movies of the previous life. However, this passion was quickly wiped out under the whip of reality. In Qin Daoxian's view, the cruelty of the world of immortal cultivation far exceeds that of the civilized society of the previous life. This cruelty is not only reflected in fighting and killing, but also in the absolute monopoly of the major forces on cultivation resources. In this world, the sect and the immortal clan control almost all the cultivation resources. Small clans and loose cultivators can only get a little bit of scraps that Zongmen and cultivators don't look down on. For example, the Qin family on Jianghu Island where Qin Daoxian is located is a typical small cultivator family. In the most prosperous period of the Qin family, there were 13 monks in the Qi refining period. Although there are no spiritual veins, there are still 7 spiritual eyes for monks to practice. Not to mention that the Qin family also occupied a miniature first-order spiritual mine copper mine. Thoughts flipping. A mountain top lined with green pines soon appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. This is the cave residence of Qin Xinhe, another cultivator of the Qin family on Jianghu Island. As one of the 2 remaining monks from the Qin family on Jianghu Island, Qin Xian's cultivation is much higher than that of Qin Daoxian, and he is already a monk on the 6th level of Qi refining. Uncle 13. Outside the cave, Qin Daoxian shouted respectfully. Come in. Inside the cave, a slightly old voice came out. Qin Daoxian walked into the cave in response, and saw an old man wearing a gray-white robe, with his head in a bun and a childish face, sitting on the jade bed looking at him fixedly. This old man is Qin Daoxian's uncle, the current patriarch of the Qin family on Jianghu Island, Qin Xinhe. Uncle 13, are you looking for me? Who knows that the old man saw Qin Daoxian, the surprise in his eyes flashed, and then quickly stood up from the jade bed, walked to Qin Daoxian in 3 or 2 steps and said excitedly, Daoxian, your cultivation base just broke through the 3rd level of Qi refining. Qin Daoxian nodded. When it comes to the cultivation that has just broken through, Qin Daoxian's face is also full of joy. Good, good, good. Qin Xinhe said 3 good words in a row and then said, I didn't expect you to start practicing at the age of 6. In just 10 years you have broken through the acquired stage, the innate stage and the 3rd level of Qi refining. God really bless my Qin family. Speaking of this, Qin Xian's face turned gloomy again. It's a pity that my Qin family is in decline. If the clan brothers and the others are still there, they will buy you a Tong Mai pill so you won't waste 5 years in the mortal realm. In this world, whether it is a mortal without spiritual roots or a seed of cultivation with spiritual roots, all must experience the cultivation of the mortal realm. That is to say, the 2 realms of acquired and innate in Qin Xian's mouth. For mortals, the innate 9th level in the mortal realm is the end of their life. Without spiritual roots, mortals will never be able to refine spiritual energy and enter the fairyland. For monks, the greatest significance of the mortal realm is only to warm the body and connect the meridians of the whole body, so as to lay a solid foundation for refining the spiritual qi in the next qi refining period. Qin Daoxian practiced at the age of 6, and did not break through to the 1st level of qi refining until he was 11. Afterwards, after 5 years of cultivation, he was promoted to the 3rd level of qi refining, with an average of 2.5 years to advance to the 1st level of cultivation. To be honest, this kind of cultivation speed is nothing in the sect and the Great Immortal Clan, but in a small family like the Qin family on Jianghu Island, it seems to be invaluable. After all, compared with the cultivators, the Qin family's cultivation resources on Jianghu Island are extremely scarce, and even compared with the scattered cultivators they are not much better. Dongfu's Hong. Qin Daoxian saw that his uncle Qin Xinhe looked ashamed and quickly said with relief, Why did the 13th uncle say this during the monster riot in Chongping County 10 years ago? If it wasn't for your help, Daoxian would have gone to Huangquan long ago. There's no such thing as today. Hearing what Qin Daoxian said, Qin Xinhe seemed to recall the warm time when he took Qin Daoxian to teach him after he rescued him, and couldn't help showing a smile on his face. Seeing that Uncle 13's face improved, Qin Daoxian quickly changed the subject and said with a smile, Uncle 13, you came to me for the copper mine, right? Seeing Qin Daoxian talking about the business, Qin Xian's expression became serious. Although the copper ore is a micro-mine, our Qin family's ability to stand on Jianghu Island is entirely due to this spiritual mine. It is a pity that after 300 years of mining, the output of copper ore has been declining year after year, from the peak annual output of more than 100 caddies of cuprite ore to less than 5 caddies per year. I guess that this spirit mine should be exhausted. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help feeling heavy. The Qin family on Jianghu Island has no spiritual veins, and the only cultivation resource they can use is this spiritual mine. It is a pity that no matter how careful it is to mine, the red copper mine is only a miniature spiritual mine after all, and it can be mined for 300 years, which is already the result of repeated savings by the Qin family on Jianghu Island. Seeing that Qin Daoxian didn't speak, Qin Xinhe continued, "Since the red copper or vein is about to be exhausted, it is better to mine with all your strength instead of being careful and saving." Uncle 13 this. Qin Daoxian was shocked when he heard the words. After all, the copper mine was the lifeline of the Qin family on Jianghu Island. Violent mining meant that the Qin family had to give up this lifeline. For a cultivator family, this was undoubtedly a prodigal act. But the intelligent Qin Daoxian knew in his heart that the biggest reason for Uncle 13 to do this was to provide him with the resources to learn the refining tools. Looking at Uncle 13 Qin Xian's firm eyes, Qin Daoxian's mouth wriggled, and the words of refusal came to his lips, but it became, "Nephew obeys Uncle 13's instructions." The two discussed the details of the copper mining for a while, and Qin Daoxian bowed and retired. It was not until he reached the entrance of the cave that Qin Xian's voice came from behind Qin Daoxian. "Daoxian, now that you have been promoted to the third level of qi refining, the spiritual eyes of the family may not be enough to support you and me in cultivation. Leave it for you alone." This sentence sounded like a thunderbolt in Qin Daoxian's heart, causing him to stop. I saw Qin Daoxian turned around and looked at the old man with white hair sitting on the jade bed with red eyes. "Go go." Qin Xinhe waved his sleeves with a gratified smile on his face. Chapter 2. Walking out of the cave, Qin Daoxian was in a heavy heart. In order to support his practice, Uncle 13 did not hesitate to give up his own path. This kind of enlightenment is truly shocking. When Qin Daoxian was reborn in this world, all he heard were all kinds of insidious, cunning, plundering and killing of cultivators for their own cultivation. This kind of behavior of self-sacrifice is extremely rare in this life, even in the previous life on the earth. But thinking of Qin Xian's honest teaching to him over the years, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but feel relieved. Using Yufengshu, Qin Daoxian shuttled through the clouds and mists in the mountains, like a man in a fairy. Speechless all the way. About half a column of incense effort, a brown mountain top appeared in front of Qin Daoxian. Compared with the caves of Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe, the top of this mountain is bare, like a hairless vulture, which is extremely ugly. Here is the miniature spiritual mine occupied by the Qin family on Jianghu Island, the copper mine, and the copper mountain is also named after this spiritual mine. Approaching the mine, Qin Daoxian could see some mortals in linen shirts entering and leaving the mine, all of whom were from the Qin clan in Chongping County. On the copper mine, Qin Liangyu, who was in charge of the mine, saw Qin Daoxian flying from the sky at a glance. Without waiting for Qin Daoxian to drop, Qin Liangyu hurriedly stepped forward, bowed and said, "Congratulations to the immortal master." In this world, cultivators are the absolute ruling class. Therefore, even if Qin Daoxian was only 16 years old, Qin Liangyu would not dare to despise him in the slightest because of his age. "You and I are both from the Qin clan, so there is no need to be more polite." Qin Daoxian fell down in front of Qin Liangyu and raised his hands slightly. With just one glance, Qin Daoxian could see that Qin Liangyi's cultivation had improved, breaking through from the 6th layer of the innate to the 7th layer of the innate. Although Qin Daoxian only routinely visits the copper mine once a year, he is still somewhat impressed by Qin Liangyu, the mine manager. It's just that, in the eyes of the monks, there is not much difference whether it is the 6th floor or the 7th floor. Innate stage and qi refining stage, the two are not the same level at all. After a pause, Qin Daoxian smiled and said, "I'm here to check the copper mine production this year." Hearing this, Qin Liangyi's vicissitudes face full of smiles suddenly collapsed. He cautiously said, "Master, immortal master, this year's red copper mine production has dropped again, only 3 kilograms. Sure enough, hearing this, Qin Daoxian frowned slightly. The situation was even worse than Qin Xinhe had predicted. This copper mine might have been exhausted. Even if you don't care about mining with all your strength, you probably won't be able to squeeze much inventory. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian took a deep breath. "Let's go, show me. Master Immortal, please come here." Qin Liangyu bowed and made a gesture of please, and Qin Daoxian walked towards the attic where the ore was stored. In the copper mine, except for the 3 mines on the mine, the miners and stewards usually live in temporary wooden houses. Among these simple wooden houses, there is a 3-story attic that stands out from the crowd. It is a storeroom established for temporary storage of copper ore. Usually Qin Liangyu lives in this attic, nominally to ensure the safety of the copper ore. In fact, he didn't want to be crowded with the miners in the smelly makeshift shed. Of course, the conditions of the red copper mine are so difficult. The Qin clan is still willing to come here to work, not relying on the pressure of the immortal masters, but the generous rewards offered by the family. The family stipulates that anyone who is willing to take the initiative to mine the copper mine can be exempted from the family's tax for 1 year after serving only 3 months. And working in the copper mine, you can get 1 tael of silver per month. Such generous remuneration makes the work of miners in the copper mine a sweet and well-paid job in the eyes of the Qin clan on Jianghu Island. If you have to make an analogy between this position and the previous life, it is probably a state-owned enterprise. Walking to the attic where the copper ore was stored, Qin Liangyu quickly took out the key to open the bronze lock on the door, and then led Qin Daoxian into the attic. Turning left and right about half a cup of tea, Qin Liangyu handed a delicate wooden box into Qin Daoxian's hands. When he was done, he handed over his hands. "Master Immortal, all the copper ore mined from last year to now are all in this box." Qin Daoxian nodded non-committally, waved his hand gently and was full of anger. Clap. The wooden box opened in response, and I saw 3 large and small 4 pieces of red ore lying quietly in the wooden box. Different from ordinary copper ore, there is an inexplicable energy circulating on this red ore. Not to mention monks, even mortals can see the strangeness of these ores. This is also the biggest difference between spirit ore and ordinary ore. Generally speaking, the grades of spirit mines are divided by the amount of aura they contain. After checking, he found that there was no problem. Qin Daoxian patted the storage bag at his waist and put the 4 pieces of copper ore into the storage bag. Seeing this, Qin Liangyu breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing his expression, Qin Daoxian smiled slightly, and then described Uncle 13's instructions in detail to the person in charge of the copper mine in front of him. What? The patriarch wants to fully exploit the red copper veins? Hearing this order from the patriarch, Qin Liangyu was very surprised. But in the identity of Qin Daoxian, it is absolutely impossible to falsely pass the order of the patriarch, that is to say, the patriarch really intends to give up the copper mine. Also, the earnings of the copper mine are not as good as the year, and it is clear that the vein has been depleted. Instead of such a half-dead mining, it is better to increase the mining intensity, dig the entire lode upside down and fully exploit all the deposits. Thinking of this, Qin Liangyu raised his head. "Master Xianshi, if the copper ore is fully exploited, we may not have enough manpower alone, and the cost of mining will also increase greatly." Qin Daoxian didn't care about the expenses mentioned by Qin Liangyu. It's just about spending some silver taels. Silver taels are still valuable in the eyes of mortals, but for monks, they are not much different from scrap iron. "Don't worry, I will instruct the magistrate of Chongping County to cooperate with you in this matter, and let you know in advance, just to give you a psychological preparation." Hearing this, Qin Liangyu hurriedly bowed his head. Although it should be said, Qin Liangyi's mood is still very bad. To fully exploit the copper ore not only means that the family has given up this spiritual mine, but also means that he is the head of the copper ore mine. You know, all along, Qin Liangyu, by virtue of his status as the head of the copper mine, has almost equaled the magistrate of Chongping County in his position within the clan. It can be said that, in addition to the high-ranking immortal masters in the family in terms of status, he will be Qin Liangyu. As the head of the copper mine, Qin Liangyu controls the mining and personnel of the mine. In addition, he can see the immortal master in the family almost every year, and can get in close contact with the immortal master. Such a beautiful difference. Who wants to give up? But giving up the copper mine was the order of the patriarch, and it was something that a mere 7th-level clan could object to. Chapter 3. Generally speaking. Except for the miners of the copper mine and the 2 remaining monks from the Qin family, almost no one lives in the Copper Mountains. Most of the Qin clan live in a county called Chongping County. Chongping County is located in the plain area not far from the foot of the Qitong Mountains. The county seat is backed by the Qitong Mountains, facing the 2 freshwater lakes of Jianghu Island Ryu Lake, and on the right is the deep water port of Jianghu Island. It's just that Wuxia is different from the oceans on Earth. In addition to fish resources, there are often monsters and beasts in the sea, so few mortals dare to fish in the sea. Over time, this deep water port was basically abandoned. Except for Qin Xianhe, the patriarch, who occasionally leads the children of the clan to go out to purchase supplies, this deep water port is rarely used. The population of Chongping County is about 3,000, and all the people living here are from the Qin clan. It's not that the Qin family has only reproduced such a few people in 300 years. It is the lack of cultivation resources on the island, and the number of cultivators in the clan has not been able to increase. Up to now there are only 2 people, Qin Xianhe and Qin Daoxian. In Wuxia, if there are not enough monks to protect them, a large population will only become the blood food of monsters. The calamity of the monsters in Chongqing County 10 years ago is a living example. Although the monsters that devastated Chongqing County back then were only some low-level monsters that didn't reach the rank. But for mortals, even these lowest-level monsters are existences that they cannot compete with. With Qin Xinhe alone, it is inevitable that he will not be able to protect Chongqing County. This is also the fundamental reason why the population of the Qin clan has been unable to develop. Without enough monk protection, the population cannot be expanded, and without the population, the number of family monks cannot be expanded, and the two complement each other. Chongqing County Government Office. The county magistrate, Qin Zhijing, led a group of officials including the county magistrate and the chief clerk to send Qin Daoxian outside the county office. Looking at the group of parents and officials in Chongqing County in front of him, Qin Daoxian instructed, "As for the mining of copper ore, your county government must fully cooperate with the head of the copper mine, and must not neglect your duties. Abide by the decree of the immortal master." With the scorching sun in the sky, the county magistrate Qin Ji was wearing a splendid official uniform. Seeing the attitude of the magistrate of Chongqing County, Qin Daoxian was slightly relieved, so he stopped talking too much, and even used the wind-fighting technique and went away. Watching Qin Daoxian Yufeng leave, the officials of Chongqing County showed indescribable envy in their eyes. Finished mining copper ore. Qin Daoxian's tense nerves gradually relaxed. Today there are only 2 monks in the family, Uncle 13 and him. In addition, Uncle 13, Qin Xian, is in high gear, and the pressure he needs to bear is far beyond what other monks in the immortal cultivation family can imagine. Unless he is willing to abandon the family and become a loose cultivator. But thinking of Uncle 13's meticulous care for him for so many years, even for him, Uncle 13 would rather give up the road to fulfill his selflessness. Qin Daoxian couldn't do anything to abandon his family anyway. So, Qin Daoxian's figure fell on a hill not far from his cave. This hill is the second important place in the family besides the copper mine, the fire room. When the ancestors of the Qin family established the Qin family's foundation on Jianghu Island, in addition to the discovery of copper ore, they also found that there were fire veins connected to the ground beneath the island. You must know that for a cultivation force, the importance of earth fire and fire veins is not at all under a mere miniature spiritual mine. It's not easy to use the fire veins of the earth fire, and it is necessary to build a building called the earth fire chamber. Unfortunately, the old ancestor of the Qin family was only a casual cultivator, and he had no ability to build a fire room at all. It was not until the rise of the monks of the family Xian, that the number of monks in the family once reached 13, and only then did they gain the inheritance of the construction of the fire room by virtue of their military exploits. In other words, the building in front of Qin Daoxian has only been built for 100 years at most. Of course, the specific year, because there is no record in the clan, Qin Daoxian is also unknown. Taking a deep breath, Qin Daoxian pushed open the heavy bronze door of the fire room. Accompanied by a sour squeak, the bronze door slowly opened, and as the door opened, a wave of heat hit the face. This feeling is very similar to the scene next to the melting furnace of the steel factory in the previous life. This is the place where Qin Daoxian has stayed the most in the past 5 years. When the family built this fire room, their greatest wish was to train a craftsman for the family. It's just that most of the cultivators of the immortal character generation spent their whole lives, and they didn't see this scene until they died. Of course, the sacrifices of the immortals are not meaningless. It is precisely because of their hard work on the battlefield that they have exchanged the building of the fire room and the inheritance of a second-order refiner. If it wasn't for their sacrifices, the Qin family on Jianghu Island would never have the day to train a craftsman. There are 3 buildings in the Qin family's fire room. The main building is the one that Qin Daoxian entered through the door, and it is the place where the fire veins gather. The 2 slightly shorter buildings next to it were built by Qin Daoxian's clansmen, and the plaques were written with the words drawing room and laboratory. After routinely checking the formation in the fire room, Qin Daoxian walked out of the fire room and pushed the door toward the laboratory next to him. Compared to the scorching heat of the fire room, the temperature in the laboratory is much cooler. However, compared with the clean and tidy fire room, the interior of the laboratory is messy. Various materials are piled up everywhere, most of which are spiritual ores that Qin Daoxian used in refining. In addition, in the most conspicuous position of the laboratory, a cylindrical object with a diameter of about 10 meters stood quietly there, which looked a little out of tune with the rather ancient laboratory. If there are steel mill workers on Earth here, they will find that the object in front of them is similar to a modern steel furnace. It's just that compared to the steel-making furnaces on Earth, the inside of this cylindrical object is engraved with patterns, which is a bit more mysterious. Qin Daoxian walked into the laboratory and stared at the behemoth in front of him with a complicated look in his eyes. After 5 full years of failure, he had to admit that he was taking things too simply. The moment when I first came into contact with the inheritance of the artifact 5 years ago, Qin Daoxian, who was a mechanical engineer in his previous life, couldn't help but open his mind. Can we use modern industrial production methods to increase the output of refining equipment? According to the second-order refiner inheritance, the refining device is generally divided into 3 stages, namely refining, shaping, and fusion. As far as Qin Daoxian knew, the stage that took the longest time to make a first-order magic weapon was precisely the stage of refining. Take the example of a first-order flying sword, the Red Shadow flying sword, in the second-order weapon refining inheritance. The main material for refining the Red Shadow Feijian is the copper ore, the spiritual ore mastered in large quantities by the Chen family. And if you want to refine the Red Shadow flying sword, it will take 3 days and 3 nights just to refine the red copper ore. On the contrary, the follow-up shaping and fusion does not take too long, and generally only takes about an hour to complete. This meant that even if the refiner wanted to refine the most basic first-order low-grade flying sword, he would have to work uninterruptedly in the fire room for 3 days and 3 nights. Greatly affects the production efficiency. In the eyes of Qin Daoxian, a mechanical engineer, this purely manual production method is simply chronic suicide. Chapter 4. Over the years, in order to develop the furnace he envisioned, Qin Daoxian smashed most of the resources that should have been used to learn the refining tools, but unfortunately it backfired. Qin Daoxian, who owns Su Hui, knows that scientific research may never be rewarded, but as long as it is successful, the rewards are also amazing. Fortunately, with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, the speed of my learning of refining is far beyond the imagination of outsiders. Qin Daoxian muttered. The Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, in his mouth, was discovered in his own sea of consciousness when he broke through to the Qi refining stage 5 years ago and opened up the sea of consciousness. It roamed quietly in the center of Qin Daoxian's sea of consciousness. Mysterious, peaceful, with a touch of golden light. Qin Daoxian had never seen the text in this scripture, but he understood its meaning and could still read it silently. Translated, the name of this sutra is called Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. This scripture is not long. Qin Daoxian finished reading it silently, which just took a stick of incense. When he first started meditating on this verse, he had not noticed anything unusual. Just after meditating, I feel full of consciousness, my mind is clearer, and I feel refreshed. However, after learning the knowledge of refining tools for a period of time and beginning to try to refine copper ore for the first time, Qin Daoxian discovered the horror of this scripture. Normally, even a Tier 1 refiner would feel mentally exhausted and sluggish after refining the spirit ore for 3 days and 3 nights at a high load. What's more, Qin Daoxian was only a rookie at the first level of Qi refining at the time, and the situation was even more unbearable. He remembered that when he finished refining the copper ore in the fire room for the first time, he simply slumped to the ground, and the entire sea of consciousness seemed to be shattered by someone. Afterwards, he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra. At this time, an unexpected thing happened. Not only did the muddy sea of consciousness return to normal, but even his divine consciousness faintly increased. After this incident, Qin Daoxian knew that the value of Hongmeng's enlightenment of the Tao Sutra alone could restore the cultivator's consciousness. Although spiritual medicines to restore consciousness are not uncommon in the world of cultivating immortals, each of them is expensive, and it is not something that a small family like the Chen family on Jianghu Island can expect. This is also the reason why he has made great progress in refining with the help of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, and he does not dare to show it easily. Of course, in addition to concealing the existence of the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra, he also needs to use the family's support for his refining resources to develop the furnace in front of him. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian's eyes became firm again. Anyway, these 5 years are not without gains at all, maybe tomorrow will be my moment of success. Qin Daoxian secretly encouraged himself. According to his assumption, the furnace in front of him should be able to replace the process of cultivating spiritual ore, just like the steel-making furnace on Earth. However, there is a big difference between refining spirit ore and refining ordinary ores. That's ore. For ordinary iron ore, refining it only requires high-temperature smelting. But the spirit ore is different. While smelting it at high temperature, the aura on the smelted spirit ore must also be fused together. This touched Qin Daoxuan's knowledge blind spot. Let him refine the ore at high temperature and he can still tinker with it, but the fusion of spiritual rhythm, according to the records in the inheritance of the refining tool, can only rely on the spiritual power of the monk to slowly integrate it. Apart from that, there are no other methods mentioned in the family's second-order weapon refining inheritance. Maybe there is no other way in this world at all. Because Qin Daoxian found that, according to the thoughts of the cultivators, no matter what happened, the first thing they thought of was to rely on their own strength to solve the problem, rather than relying on external things. This is fundamentally different from Earth civilization. Whether it is alchemy, weapon refining, talisman making, or even during the battle, immortal cultivators tend to rely more on their own strength. Even if having a powerful magic weapon can take a lot of advantage in battle, the cultivator is still more keen to improve his own cultivation. This is also the reason why alchemists are often more popular than alchemists. Closer to home. In the past 5 years, Qin Daoxian has devoted all his attention to the furnace in front of him, apart from learning the knowledge of traditional craftsmanship. To say it failed is not entirely correct. The furnace in front of him was divided into 5 parts by Qin Daoxian according to its functions. They are the control system, the feeding port, the heating and melting system, the floating system and the discharging port. The core of which is the control system. When it comes to the control system, this is what Qin Daoxian is most proud of. Because the core driving formation in this control system was originally created by Qin Daoxian based on the formation knowledge in the second-order weapon refining inheritance, plus his own ideas. In addition, he used the sliding rod to control the distance between the spirit stone and the driving array, so he could control the amount of aura received by the driving array, thereby controlling the temperature in the furnace. In other words, through this furnace, with the cooperation of a few mortals, the copper ore can be melted. The only problem that cannot be solved now is how to integrate the aura on the spiritual ore. This problem has plagued Qin Daoxian for almost a year. Since the driving formation Pearl Jade was in front, he was more inclined to create a new formation to fuse the aura on the spiritual ore, but unfortunately it has not been successful. Qin Daoxian stood in front of the furnace with a stack of blueprints in his hand. Upon closer inspection, the drawings on this stack of drawings are all 3 views and detailed drawings of the furnace in front of you. The only place where it's empty is the bottom of the furnace. Because according to Qin Daoxuan's vision, there should be a formation that can integrate the spiritual charm of spiritual ore. Ugh. After a long time, Qin Daoxian sighed. This feeling of being close to the door is really uncomfortable. After thinking about it for a long time and thinking of the pain in his head, Qin Daoxian slowly stopped his thoughts. Put down the drawing in your hand. Qin Daoxian simply meditated on the spot, closed his eyes and recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. For him, reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic and practicing Guiyuan Gong every day are almost unstoppable behaviors. Even compared to the practice of Guiyuan Gong, Qin Daoxian recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic more times. Because every time he refines tools, he will be exhausted and his spiritual consciousness will be sluggish. At this time, as long as he silently recites the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra once, he will become alive again and he will naturally enjoy it. Along with meditating on the scriptures, Qin Daoxian fell into chaos. At this moment, whether it was the flow of air or the loss of time, he didn't notice it, as if he had completely lost consciousness. Soon the time for a stick of incense passed. Opening his eyes, Qin Daoxuan's face gradually became serious. This was the 9th time. I used to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently before, but this phenomenon has never occurred. It's just the last few times that new changes have obviously taken place on his body. I don't know if this change is good or bad. Qin Daoxian looked at the 9 star dusts in the sea of knowledge that revolved around the golden scriptures like stars in the moon, and muttered, "These star dusts, what are they?" Chapter 5. With a heavy heart, Qin Daoxian walked out of the laboratory. This time he didn't even carry out the daily routine of refining equipment, so he hurriedly left Yufeng, and he stole his first laziness in 5 years. By the time Qin Daoxian came to the 13th Uncle Cave Mansion again, it was already late. Raising his head, he glanced at the moonless sky. This was the 16th year that he came to this world. Because he has a mature soul in his body, Qin Daoxian always feels a little out of tune with this world when he is alone. Daoxian. Just when he was in a trance, an old voice pulled him back. After returning to his senses, Qin Daoxian found that the 13th Uncle Qin Xinhe was standing in front of him, looking at him with concern. Uncle 13. Qin Daoxian hurriedly bowed and saluted. Qin Xinhe stepped forward, patted his shoulder lightly and pointedly said, "Son, I'm sorry for you." Qin Daoxian was silent. After a long while he took out 3 large and 1 small 4 pieces of copper ore from the storage bag. "Uncle 13, this is the ore taken from the copper mine today as you expected, the copper ore. Production has dropped again." Although he had expected it, when he heard the news, Qin Xinhe still felt a little uncomfortable. For the past 300 years, the copper veins of the Qin family have supported the cultivation of the family monks. It is about to be completely lost now, not to mention the loss of interest. As the only old man of the Qin family on Jianghu Island, it is emotionally difficult to accept. Qin Xinhe can still remember the wanton and unrestrainedness when he was chatting and laughing with his 12 brothers. Now, with the passage of time, everything seems to have gone by in the blink of an eye. The clan brothers died on the battlefield, but he, the youngest clan brother, had to shoulder the heavy responsibility of the family. Qin Daoxian didn't have much affection for the copper ore. In his eyes, the copper ore was just a vein of spiritual or nothing more. Qin Xinhe glanced at the copper ore that Qin Daoxian handed over, shook his head and said, "You should keep these copper ore for refining and learning." "Yes, Uncle 13. Qin Daoxian bowed to answer the order. "By the way, how is your progress in learning the refining tool now?" Talking about Qin Daoxian's learning of refining, Qin Xinhe couldn't help showing a nervous look on his face. Hearing Qin Xinhe asking about his level of refining, Qin Daoxian said solemnly, "There are a total of 13 types of refining methods recorded in the family's refining heritage, including 12 first-order tools and 1 second-order. At present, I have only mastered the refining methods of 6 first-order low-grade instruments. As for the refining of the other 4 first-grade middle-grade instruments and 2 first-grade high-grade instruments, my nephew has not yet mastered them." Hearing Qin Daoxian's answer, Qin Xian's eyes were full of relief. In just 5 years, it is quite good to have mastered all the refining techniques of the first-order low-grade instruments in the inheritance of the family's instrument refining. Qin Xinhe knew clearly that although the family had a heritage of refining tools, no one taught them. Qin Daoxian's learning of refining tools is entirely by himself, and Qin Xinhe has a deep understanding of the degree of difficulty. Because the monks of their immortal generation have all taught themselves the inheritance of the family's second-order weapon refining, and they all can't get in. The way of refining tools is inherently difficult. In addition to consuming a lot of resources, it also requires someone to teach them to go more smoothly on this road. This is also the reason why there are almost no alchemists in the loose cultivation. Just one piece of artifact refining inheritance will keep everyone out of the door, let alone the various resources expended in learning the artifact. Seeing Qin Xian's satisfied look, Qin Daoxian was embarrassed. Because he just lied. In fact, he not only mastered the refining of 6 first-order low-grade magic tools, but also the 13 kinds of magic tools in the family's inheritance of refining tools. He only did not master the refining method of second-order magic tools. In addition, Qin Daoxian has mastered the refining of all the first-order magic tools in the inheritance of the refining tools. To be precise, the current Qin Daoxian is already a first-order high-grade refiner. It's not that he is clumsy, but the news is too shocking. The cultivation base is only 3 levels of qi refining, but the level of refining has reached a level that many senior first-order refiners of the 9th level of qi refining cannot reach, and they rely entirely on self-study. This is no longer a genius but a demon. Of course. Due to his cultivation, although Qin Daoxian has mastered the refining method of first-order high-grade instruments, his success rate is still too low to successfully refine them. The reason is that the first-order high-grade magic tools need to be refined with more first-order spiritual ores, and the refining time is longer. With Qin Daoxian's infuriating energy and spiritual awareness, it is difficult to support it to the end. As for the subsequent shaping and fusion, it is not too difficult for him. He has studied artifact refining for 5 years, and it is only occasionally that he succeeds in refining a first-order high-grade artifact. With his cultivation base, there is no pressure to refine first-order low-grade instruments, but it is a bit reluctant to refine first-order middle-grade instruments, and refining first-order high-grade instruments is entirely a matter of luck. It's not that his level of refining is not enough, but that his cultivation is not enough, and his true qi and consciousness are not enough. This is also the reason why Qin Daoxian is so eager to develop a spirit or furnace. With the help of this kind of furnace, he can save the consumption of infuriating energy and spiritual consciousness in the stage of refining materials, allowing him to deal with the shaping and fusion of magical instruments more easily. At that time, let alone a first-order high-grade magic tool. It is a second-order magic tool, and Qin Daoxian is not unable to try it. The embarrassed look on Qin Daoxian's face flashed, and he quickly adjusted his attitude and said sincerely, "My nephew does not dare to take credit. If it weren't for the strong support of the family over the years, my level of refining would not have improved so fast." On this point, Qin Daoxian did not talk nonsense. In the past 5 years, if the various spirit minerals invested by the Qin family on Jianghu Island were converted into spirit stones, there would be at least 5,000 spirit stones. Such a huge amount of wealth, not to mention a loose cultivator, even an ordinary cultivator family can't get it. In addition to the accumulation of 300 years, the Qin family of Jianghu Island still relies on the wealth accumulated by the monks of the immortal generation on the battlefield. Even so, Qin Daoxian's learning of refining tools still brought heavy pressure to the family, so that the patriarch Qin Xinhe had to consider giving up the copper mine and fully cultivate Qin Daoxian. Hearing Qin Daoxian's words, Qin Xinhe nodded with a smile. "Don't take credit and don't be arrogant, very good." With that said, Qin Xinhe changed his words. "Daoxian, you know that our family is poor, so you must cherish the opportunity that the family gives you to learn to refine. Remember, nephew." Then, Qin Daoxian reported to Qin Xinhe about the full-scale mining of copper ore, and Yufeng left. Watching Qin Daoxian leave, Qin Xinhe paced back to his cave. As the current patriarch of the Qin family, although the spiritual eyes in Qin Xian's cave mansion are exhausted, in terms of size and style, it far exceeds Qin Daoxian's cave mansion. Of course, the reason why Qin Xinhe did not build Qin Daoxian's cave in a luxurious style was to prevent Qin Daoxian from indulging in extravagant enjoyment at a young age. This painstaking effort is destined to be impossible to tell outsiders. After several turns, Qin Xinhe walked to a wall made of broken dragon stone. I saw him stretch out his palm, and with the activation of infuriating energy, the formation pattern on the wall suddenly lit up. Immediately afterwards, the wall made of broken dragon stone slowly moved away, and the entrance was actually a secret room. As Qin Xinhe stepped into the secret room, the spiritual light inside was shining, and the densely placed spiritual stones were all about the size of a baby's fist. Chapter 6. Qin Daoxian, who returned to his cave, would naturally not know. The 13th uncle, who just kept saying that his family was poor, was actually counting his belongings in the secret room full of spirit stones. Inside the cave, Qin Daoxian opened the stone plate that sealed the spiritual eye, and suddenly the spiritual energy burst out again. Seeing this, he didn't dare to waste the slightest bit, and hurriedly started Guiyuan Gong to bring the spiritual energy into the body to refine. Cultivating the immortal realm in Wuxia. According to the efficiency of cultivating spiritual energy, the spiritual roots of monks are generally divided into 4 grades, namely lower spiritual roots, middle spiritual roots, upper spiritual roots, and heavenly spiritual roots. Normally, the lower spiritual root cultivator absorbs a lot of spiritual energy into the body, often only refining 1 point, and the efficiency is very low. Therefore, under the conditions of the same resources, the cultivation speed of the lower spiritual cultivator is the slowest. The efficiency of cultivating spiritual energy is much higher for the cultivator of the middle spiritual root, which is generally twice that of the cultivator of the lower spiritual root. The speed at which the cultivator of the spiritual roots refines the spiritual energy will be doubled again, and the very spiritual energy can be refined by 4 points. The most terrifying thing is the heavenly spiritual root cultivator. The spiritual energy absorbed into the body can be completely refined. With the same resources, the cultivation speed is 10 times that of the lower spiritual roots cultivator. As for Qin Daoxian, he also didn't know what level of spiritual roots he had. Because the Qin family on Jianghu Island did not have a magic tool to detect spiritual roots, the family cultivators could only vaguely judge their spiritual root level based on the speed at which they refined spiritual energy. In addition, there is no accurate reference standard. Whether this judgment is right or not can only be a matter of opinion. According to the patriarch Qin Xinhe, the spiritual root he possesses is the lower spiritual root. Because of this, the patriarch began to practice cultivation at the age of 10, and it took 80 years to reach the 6th level of qi refining. It is true that Qin Xian's cultivation is so slow, and there is a factor of insufficient family cultivation resources, but the main reason is that his own cultivation aptitude is really poor. And Qin Daoxian's cultivation speed is much faster. In just 5 years he has broken through all the way to the 3rd level of qi refining. At this speed, he would be able to catch up with Chen Xian's 6th level qi refining in a maximum of 10 years. Compared with Chen Xian's 80 years of cultivation, he reached the 6th level of qi refining, and his cultivation speed was more than 4 times faster. That is to say, if Chen Xian's spiritual root level is a lower spiritual root, then Chen Daoxian is at least an upper spiritual root. In addition to the 1 in million cultivator, Chen Daoxian's spiritual root level is already the top. This is to say that he was born in a small family such as the Chen family on Jianghu Island, and was replaced by a large family of cultivators such as Chen Daoxian, who has long been given the best treatment for training. Not to mention that he still has a terrifying talent for refining. The next morning, Chen Daoxian, who had been practicing all night, refined the last breath of spiritual energy, and felt the infuriating energy in his dantian gradually consolidating, and his face couldn't help showing a satisfied look. He just broke through the 3rd level of qi refining, and after only 1 night of cultivation he consolidated the vain true qi. He was very satisfied with this progress. At this speed, in 3 years at most, he can break through the 4th level of qi refining and become a mid-level qi refining cultivator. You know, breaking through the 4th level of qi refining increases the strength of a cultivator much more than breaking through the 3rd level of qi refining. According to the records of Guiyuan Gong, a cultivator's true qi can increase by at least 50% from the initial stage of qi refining to the middle stage of qi refining, far exceeding the increase of 20% when breaking through the 3rd level of qi refining. After finishing the practice, Chen Daoxian sealed the spiritual eye in the cave with a stone plate again, so that the spiritual energy no longer overflowed. After doing all this, he couldn't help falling into a deep groan. As usual, every morning after finishing his cultivation, he would recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. But now, his consciousness sank, and he fell into contemplation as he looked at the 9 stardust revolving around the golden scriptures in the sea of knowledge. To be honest, he was a little unsure whether he should continue to recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment scripture silently. The 9 stardust in the sea of knowledge appeared after he silently recited the Hongmeng Enlightenment classic for 9 consecutive days. Today is the 10th day and he continues to meditate on the scriptures, and he does not know what changes will happen. But Hongmeng Enlightenment classic is Chen Daoxian's biggest trump card, and it is obviously impossible for him to give up. Forget it, it's a blessing, not a disaster. It's a disaster that can't be avoided. Since I can't let go of this opportunity, I must be mentally prepared to be attacked by this opportunity. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian's eyes became firm again. Next, close your eyes and recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra silently. Soon, a wave of Tao rhymes circulated in Chen Daoxian's sea of consciousness, and then he fell into chaos and lost consciousness. Only his mouth was still instinctively reciting the Hongmeng Enlightenment classic. The time for a stick of incense is fleeting. When Chen Daoxian opened his eyes again, he found that there was another stardust in his sea of consciousness. The 10th one. Chen Daoxian pondered, it's just. He frowned, this time it seems a little different. Chen Daoxian found that the 10 star dusts revolving around the golden scriptures in the sea of consciousness seemed to be attracting each other this time. If it wasn't for Chen Daoxian's deliberate control, these 10 stardusts would have aggregated into one. Wanna be one? Chen Daoxian murmured, and then his eyes were firm. Then it will fulfill you. Thinking of this, Chen Daoxian no longer controlled stardust and let them collide together. Boom. When the 10 stardust collided together, Chen Daoxian's consciousness was blank at first, then he felt that his consciousness was constantly rising, and finally, his consciousness seemed to be in the scene of the Big Bang of the universe. This is deep in the sea of knowledge. The countless knowledge he had learned came to him like a tide. Among these knowledge, there were knowledge that he had learned in the past life but had already been vaguely impressed, and there was also the knowledge that he had studied hard in this life and impressed him. For example, the main practice method Guiyuan Gong, that he practices every day. Chen Daoxian's consciousness lightly clicked on the Guiyuan Gong exercise. In an instant, a lot of insights about Guiyuan Gong came to my mind. It turns out that Guiyuan Gong should be cultivated in this way. No wonder I used to practice and I always felt that something was wrong. It turned out that this kind of cultivation can absorb the spiritual energy to a greater extent. In just a split second, he discovered a problem he had never realized before. It turns out that I can still practice like this. What is going on? Why do I feel like I've become so much smarter all of a sudden? This feeling is like a legendary epiphany. That's right, epiphany. He remembered a cultivation phenomenon recorded in the ancient family books, epiphany. It's just that the opportunity of epiphany only exists in legends. Most cultivators will never encounter an epiphany in their entire life. But what's going on now? When 10 stardust collided together, he had an epiphany. After thinking about all this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but be stunned by this shocking opportunity. Chapter 7, Correct. Spirit or Furnace. Qin Daoxian immediately remembered the problem that bothered him the most, which was the spirit fusion formation on the spirit or furnace. Because he had created a brand new formation method before, the driving formation method, Qin Daoxian felt that he had a high talent in the formation method. Therefore, he wants to continue to create new formations to solve the problem of aura fusion in the process of refining spirit ore. But after thinking hard for a year, there is still not much clue. In the sea of consciousness space, Qin Daoxian looked at the dense group of lights floating in front of him. Each of these light groups represents the knowledge he has learned, some of which are profound and some of them simple. It is manifested in the sea of consciousness, that is, the size and brightness of the light clusters are different. For example, he just opened the light group representing the Guiyuan Gong exercise, which records all his insights and processes of practicing Guiyuan Gong in the past 5 years. Therefore, this light group is also the brightest and largest of all light groups. Besides, the second largest light group is the knowledge of refining tools. Qin Daoxian quickly opened it. Sure enough, the refining methods of the 12 first-order magical tools and the insights during refining are all recorded in this light group. In addition to these, there is an unfinished and incomplete magical tool, which is the spiritual or furnace that Qin Daoxian has painstakingly researched for 5 years. So it is? Qin Daoxian's consciousness fluctuated violently, and bursts of joy and satisfaction flooded into his heart. The direction I thought before was completely wrong. The fusion of spiritual consciousness is to use a violent suppression method to force the aura on many spiritual ores to merge into one, and I want to achieve this kind of strong pressure through the formation method. It's a little unrealistic. After all, the formation has no spiritual wisdom, and can only exert its power through the manipulation of manipulators. At this time, mortals who do not have spiritual consciousness cannot master the strength to suppress the spiritual rhythm. The suppression force is too large, the aura collapses, and the suppression force is too small, and the aura cannot be merged. Therefore, the key to the fusion spirit formation is to guide, not suppress. That's right. This is the key to the fusion spirit formation. If you follow this line of thinking, the fusion formation should be arranged like this. With the blessing of 10 star dusts, Qin Daoxian's comprehension has been directly increased tenfold, and he can't think of a clue in a year. At this moment, in less than a stick of incense, a complete fusion spirit formation was actually created. So, the time for a stick of incense has passed. Qin Daoxian only felt that his eyes were dark, and his consciousness withdrew from the depths of the sea of knowledge. Ended. Opening his eyes, Qin Daoxian realized that this epiphany was over. Unfortunately, it would be great if the epiphany lasted a little longer. Qin Daoxian muttered to himself in an inexhaustible way. Immediately, he thought of the fusion spirit formation method again, and he couldn't care about anything at the moment. The spiritual or furnace can be said to be the thing that took the most effort since he came to this world. Qin Daoxian worked hard to learn the knowledge of tool refining, in order to combine the knowledge of the two worlds to create a magic tool that even mortals can use. Only in this way can the vast population of mortals play their true role. Instead of being like the clansmen in Chongping County, they can only be reduced to a reproductive tool that provides seeds for immortal cultivation. Now this magic weapon is finally coming out. Think of this. Qin Daoxian could no longer hold back his eager heart. When he even used the wind control technique, he flew directly from the cave to the top of the fire room. In a hurry, Qin Daoxian's speed in the wind was 2 or 3 points faster than usual. In less than half a cup of tea, the 3 buildings of the fire room came into view. Qin Daoxian lowered his body and pushed open the door of the laboratory. Seeing the huge silver-white metal furnace placed in the center of the laboratory, I fell into contemplation. According to the spirit or furnace refining method he just realized, the furnace in front of him is obviously a failure. In fact, according to the description of the magic tool in the family's inheritance of the refining tool, it can also judge the failure of this furnace. Because of a successful magic weapon, it is impossible to see the formation pattern on the surface, and all the formation patterns will be integrated into the magic weapon itself in the final fusion stage. However, the surface of the furnace in front of him was covered with patterns. Forget it, re-refining it and re-refining it. With a sigh, Qin Daoxian knew that it was impossible to re-add the formation method on the basis of this furnace. It is impossible to refine half of the instruments and continue refining them afterwards. The reason for this is because of the spirit. In the fusion formation stage, the refiner needs to use the formation method to perfectly fuse the aura on the refined and shaped instrument embryo, so as to exert the power of the instrument. For any instrument, if the aura dissipates, it means that the instrument is destroyed. Even if the main material of this magic weapon looks intact, it can still be used as a weapon in the hands of mortals. But for cultivators, magic tools have no aura, and they are just sharper mortal tools. Thoughts were surging in his mind, but the movements in his hands were not slow at all. The laboratory he built was full of various spiritual ores used for refining, as well as ordinary iron ores. That's right, iron ore. This furnace is so huge, it is naturally impossible to refine it all with spiritual ore. In fact, the main material of this furnace is just ordinary iron ore. It's just that Qin Daoxian added a kind of spiritual ore called silver moonstone to it. Therefore, the cost of this furnace is not exaggerated, at most it is comparable to a first-order high-grade magic weapon. In fact, it is normal to think about it carefully, otherwise how much spiritual ore would it take for such a huge furnace? Whether it is possible to fill in the entire copper mine of the Qin family can be said, which also loses the original intention of refining it. Fortunately, the silver moonstone is still in stock. Qin Daoxian rummaged through the boxes, and finally found the spiritual mine he was looking for in a corner of the laboratory. As for ordinary iron ore, there is no need to worry about this. There is an iron ore vein with considerable reserves on Jianghu Island. When Qin Daoxian prepared all the refining materials, it was already noon. He touched the storage bag at his waist. Qin Daoxian pushed open the door of the fire room. As the bronze door of the fire room opened, the heat wave came again. Call? Qin Daoxian sighed and walked firmly towards the heat-gathering formation in the center of the fire room. Although there was no flame, Qin Daoxian could feel a huge amount of heat gathering above the heat-gathering formation, waiting to melt the material in it. Qin Daoxian took out the iron ore and Inue mine from the storage bag, and piled them into two mines, one large and one small. For the furnace artifact, refining the material is not difficult. The main reason is that the iron ore is so refined that it is almost melted into molten iron when it is placed over the heat-gathering array. Compared with the hard-to-refine spiritual or ordinary ore is like a docile sheep. Refining, shaping, these two steps did not encounter any difficulties. In front of Qin Daoxian, a behemoth with a respective dozens of tons was lifted up by him with infuriating energy and floated in the air. Next is the most difficult fusion formation. Taking a deep breath and calming down the boiling Dantian Qi, Qin Daoxian worked his way up and engraved the lines of the formation on the furnace in front of him. The first heavy drive pattern. The second reunion heat pattern. The third layer of floating formations. And the most important fourth layer of formations, the fusion of spirit formations. Success. As the last pattern was inscribed, the furnace in front of him emitted a golden light. Afterwards, the golden light slowly converged, and all the patterns merged into the furnace's body little by little. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxian jumped up happily, excited. The feeling of excitement this Zhong felt was no less than when he had obtained the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. Chapter 8. Looking at the silver-white behemoth in front of him, Qin Daoxian felt an indescribable satisfaction in his heart. It doesn't seem appropriate to call it the spirit or furnace again. From now on, I'll call you the spirit furnace. Qin Daoxian looked at the furnace in front of him and gave it a new name. After 5 years of research and development, the magic weapon has finally landed. The first thing Qin Daoxian has to do is to try this melting furnace. He wanted to see if this spirit melting furnace was as he imagined, without consuming infuriating energy and divine sense, and just manually manipulating the two levers on the control system to control this magical instrument. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian couldn't wait even more. He hurriedly took out 2 pieces of copper ore from the storage bag and threw them in through the feeding port of the Rongling furnace. This time, Qin Daoxian did not use the slightest bit of infuriating energy, he did it manually. I saw him gently move the second lever of the Rongling furnace console. As Qin Daoxian manipulated the operation lever, the driving formation slowly ran under the control of the spirit stone, driving the floating formation on the Rongling furnace. Play a role. After the 2 pieces of copper ore entered the Rongling furnace from the feeding port, They were controlled by the floating array and hovered in the center of the furnace. The first step is complete. Seeing that the Rongling furnace was running as he imagined, Qin Daoxian was greatly encouraged. Next, it is to heat and smelt the spirit ore. He continued to operate the first operating lever, and by controlling the distance between the spiritual stone and the driving array, he controlled the input of spiritual energy, thereby controlling the operation of the heat-gathering array. I saw Qin Daoxian slowly push the operating lever, and under the action of the heat-gathering array, the temperature inside the melting furnace rose sharply. Soon, it reached the temperature that Qin Daoxian's heat-gathering formation could reach when he normally refines his utensils. This is the end? Seeing the Rongling furnace running quietly, Qin Daoxian felt an unprecedented ease. It feels like watching the production of automated machines in previous lives. Of course, Qin Daoxian knew in his heart that the real test had not yet come. The most difficult problem for the Rongling stove is the fusion of aura. Although the Rongling formation on the Rongling stove was his epiphany, he could not guarantee whether it would work or not. With the passage of time, even the red copper ore could not withstand the uninterrupted high-temperature smelting in the Rongling furnace. 4 hours later, the two copper ore finally melted. Seeing this scene, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but cheer up. He knew that the most critical time had come. Under the observation of consciousness, Qin Daoxian found that in the melting furnace, the two red liquid groups slowly merged into one under the action of the floating array. Not only that, the aura on the two liquid groups is actually slowly merging. This is not that he is using his divine sense to suppress and fuse the aura. In fact, his divine sense has not touched the aura on the copper ore, let alone suppressing the fusion of the two, except for observing in the furnace. Obviously, this is the effect of the fusion spirit formation. Wuxia, at the moment when the aura merged, a burst of white light emerged from the top of the Rongling furnace, and this burst of white light was accompanied by a rapid roar. This sound is somewhat like the sound of high-pressure water vapor in the previous life. This is a small design made by Qin Daoxian based on the spiritual pressure changes generated by the fusion of spiritual rhythms on the spirit mine, which is equivalent to a feedback system to remind the smelters that the spirit mine has been refined. Otherwise, mortals have no spiritual consciousness. How can they know whether the spirit ore has been successfully refined? When Qin Daoxian heard this short whimper, he was happier than hearing Xianla. He hurriedly operated the joystick, and the refined liquid spirit ore slowly floated out from the discharge port. Okay. Qin Daoxian was very excited. He took the refined red copper slug in front of him with infuriating energy, checked it carefully with his divine sense, and found that it was no different from the copper ore he had refined. Great. In this way, as long as there are enough melting furnaces, my refining efficiency can be at least dozens of times. Qin Daoxian couldn't help but said. Taking the refining of the red shadow flying sword as an example, Qin Daoxian originally needed to refine the materials for 3 days and 3 nights, but now he only needs to complete the shaping and fusion of the magic weapon. However, the shaping and fusion of the first-order magic tools are relatively simple. Even if the fusion is a little more difficult, it can be done in at most an hour. In other words, the original workload of 3 days and 3 nights has now been reduced to 1 hour, and the work efficiency has increased by 36 times. Qin Daoxian, a craftsman, outnumbered 36 craftsmen in the outside world. Even more terrifying, this efficiency can be replicated. Once this revolutionary instrument is popularized in the future, as long as the family has only one artifact refiner, it is equivalent to the birth of 36 artifact refiners in the outside world. With this thing, are you still worried that there is no spirit stone? Still worried that there are no cultivation resources? At this moment, Qin Daoxian felt an unprecedented ease. Once the family declined and the monks in the family withered, it was like a mountain pressing down on his heart, making him dare not relax for a moment. But at this moment he finally cleared the clouds and saw the sky, and all the pressure was gone from him. However, in order for the melting furnace to function, the ground fire chamber connected to the fire veins of the ground fire is essential, otherwise the heat-gathering array will not be able to function. After speaking, he glanced at the small fire room he was in and shook his head. This fire room is definitely not good, and the terrain here is not suitable for building a refining workshop. After thinking about it carefully, he still felt that Chongping County was in a good location. Chongping County is located in the plain area and has a broad space for development. Even if you want to expand the refining workshop in the future, it is only a matter of words. But the premise of all this is that you need money. But Qin Daoxian knew that the family no longer had much money. Over the years, in order to support him in learning to forge, the family has invested at least 5,000 spirit stones. 5,000 spirit stones are a huge fortune even for a foundation establishment cultivator. At least scattered cultivators, few people can come up with so many spirit stones. However, without relying on the family, who can Qin Daoxian rely on? Although it has been 16 years since he came to this world, he has never been out of Jianghu Island once when he has grown so big. For so many years, in addition to cultivating, he basically learned to refine tools. Uncle 13 rarely bothered him about family affairs. For the Qin family on Jianghu Island, Qin Daoxian's ability to become an artifact refiner is the greatest reward for the family. Contemplation for a long time. Qin Daoxian finally decided to use the power of the family. Even if he really couldn't get help, at least he could let Uncle 13 help him come up with ideas. After all, compared with a rookie like Qin Daoxian in the cultivation world, Qin Xinhe, who had participated in the War of Monks and had worked in the Wangxinghai Immortal Cultivation realm and even the Xianyunzhu Immortal Cultivation realm, was much more experienced than him. Just do it. Qin Daoxian quickly put down the melting furnace and flew towards the cave house of the patriarch Qin Xinhe. Qin Xinhe Cave House. Now, after checking the family secret, Qin Xinhe was holding a cup of tea, humming a little song, and lying comfortably on the chair to bask in the sun. Ah! Suddenly, Qin Xinhe sneezed fiercely and sat up from the chair with a blank face. Chapter 9. Copper Mountains. Fire Room. Qin Xinhe stared at this huge behemoth that was several feet tall and 10 feet long in front of him, and couldn't help being stunned. What's even more peculiar is that, judging from the vague aura emanating from this behemoth, this thing is actually a magic weapon. Seeing this scene, Qin Xinhe turned to look at Qin Daoxian next to him, and couldn't help but said, "You just said that this thing called Rongling Furnace can help you refine spiritual ore? Right?" Qin Daoxian nodded affirmatively. To be precise, the Rongling Furnace can not only help refiners to refine spiritual ore, but also does not require monks to control it. Only a few mortals can control it. Hearing this, Qin Xinhe suddenly became restless. It is incredible enough to be able to help the refiner to refine the spiritual ore. This thing does not need to be controlled by a cultivator. This is not incredible but shocking. If it is true as Qin Daoxian said, then the significance of this magic weapon is too great. Although Qin Xinhe failed to become an artifact refiner, he had learned the inheritance of family artifact refining in his early years, and he still understood some basic common sense of artifact refining. He knew that in the process of refining some low-level instruments, refining materials was often the most time-consuming and laborious. If a few mortals and a furnace can solve the problem of refining spiritual ore, then the refiner's refining speed must be greatly accelerated. Such a simple truth as the patriarch of the Qin family on Jianghu Island, he could see it at a glance. Qin Daoxian saw Uncle 13's skeptical expression, no nonsense, and immediately operated it in front of him. 4 hours later. Because of the closed nature of the melting furnace, it can smelt spiritual ore faster than the refining master directly using the heat-gathering method. It usually takes 3 days to refine the copper ore, but now it only takes 4 hours to complete the refining. Qin Daoxian said while operating the second lever to remove the crimson liquid mass from the melting furnace. Although Qin Xinhe was not an artifact refiner, he could still feel the rich aura emanating from the crimson liquid mass in front of him. He immediately took the crimson liquid mass in front of him, blinked, looked at the crimson liquid mass and then looked at the Rongling furnace. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. After half a cup of tea, Qin Xian's laughter stopped. Seemingly realizing that he had lost his temper in front of his nephew, Qin Xinhe couldn't help blushing, but soon, this emotion was left behind by him. Daoxian, what is the cost of refining this melting furnace? Seeing the serious expression on Qin Xian's face, Qin Daoxian couldn't help saying, Patriarch, iron ore and silver moonstone are needed to refine the melting furnace. Iron ore is worthless and the main cost is silver moonstone. He paused. The stove in front of me consumed a total of 39 caddies of silver moonstones. If it was replaced with spirit stones, it would be around 195 spirit stones. Although silver moonstone is the same as the first-order spirit ore of red copper ore, the price is much higher than that of red copper ore, reaching 5 spirit stones per kilogram, mainly because the reserves of silver moonstone in Wangxinghai are relatively low. Of course, as the Qinyuan sword sect continued to wage wars against the Izumo country over the years, plundering a large amount of Izumo's resources, the price of the silver moonstone was also decreasing. To be honest, the most widespread and cheapest spiritual ore in Wanxinghai is neither silver moonstone nor red copper ore, but a first-order spiritual ore called black iron. This stuff is not only abundant in Wanxinghai, but also flooded in the immortal cultivation realm of Xianyun continent. As a result, many low-level monks who neither know how to refine tools nor can afford to buy magic tools often use black iron to refine them roughly, and then directly use them as magic tools, which makes people laugh. 195 spirit stones, it's cheap, not expensive. Qin Xinhe touched his goatee and said with a smile. He knew in his heart that the mere 195 spirit stones were not worth mentioning compared to the help to the refiner. Qin Daoxian, who was standing on the side, shook his head and said, "Ahem, Patriarch, 195 spirit stones are just the cost of this furnace. Haven't you calculated the cost of building the fire chamber?" Hearing this, Qin Xinhe was taken aback. How to build a fire room? Doesn't the family have this fire room? Hearing that Qin Daoxian was going to build a fire room, Qin Xinhe suddenly couldn't calm down. Qin Xinhe couldn't understand how expensive the construction of the fire room was, because this fire room was built in his hands. It took more than 2,000 spirit stones to build it back then. Seeing Qin Xian's appearance of an iron rooster, Qin Daoxian's mind moved slightly, and looking at the expression of Uncle 13, it seemed that there was still a lot of stock in the family. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian said calmly, "Patriarch, although this fire room is good, it is too small. And there are many unreasonable places in the original arrangement, such as the heat-gathering array here, after the melting furnace. This heat-gathering array is useless, and here." Qin Daoxian counted down the inadequacies of the fire room in front of him. It was not until Qin Xian's old face was blue at the end that Qin Daoxian stopped embarrassingly. "Humph." Qin Xinhe snorted, "Is the fire room I built so unbearable?" Seeing that Uncle 13's expression was not good, Qin Daoxian immediately shook his head like a rattle and said, "I can't say that, but with the Rongling furnace this fire room is really not very practical. And 13th uncle, think about it carefully. If you want to maximize the efficiency of the refiner's refining of magical instruments, at least one refiner must be equipped with 4 to 5 melting furnaces. Looking at it now, we can barely squeeze in this fire room, but what about the family's birth of more refiners in the future? Is this space enough?" Hearing this, Qin Xinhe said angrily, "There are only 2 cultivators in the family now. You just want to give birth to a lot of refiners, and none of the Zhou family dares to think about it." Hey. Seeing Qin Daoxian smirking, Qin Xinhe pondered. A long time. He looked at Qin Daoxian solemnly and said, "Come with me." Qin Xinhe and Qin Daoxian flew towards Qin Xian's cave mansion one after the other. Less than a stick of incense time. The 2 landed in front of the cave. Along the way, Qin Xinhe didn't say a word. Qin Daoxian vaguely knew what Qin Xinhe was going to do, and couldn't help but look forward to it. Enter the cave. The 2 turned around and stopped in front of a stone wall made of broken dragon stone. Qin Xinhe looked at the broken dragon stone whose surface was as clean as jade and said thoughtfully, "My Qin family has been based on Jianghu Island for 273 years since our ancestor Qin Dengyuan. You know the reason why our Qin family can, what is it that continues to this day?" Qin Xinhe turned around and looked at Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian thought for a while, then shook his head. "My Qin family has been able to stand for 300 years, relying on the spirit of the ancestors who did not hesitate to fight and sacrifice for the younger generation of the family. It depends on the inheritance of the younger generation of the family to the hard work and sacrifice of the ancestors." Qin Xinhe raised his head slightly, climbing to the immortal Tao, blessing the future generations. "In the past 300 years my Qin family did it." At this moment, Qin Xinhe thought of the big brother who died generously on the battlefield, the 7th brother who fought his life to protect his youngest brother, and the ancestors who sacrificed their lives for the family generation after generation. Infected by Qin Xian's sad mood, Qin Daoxian could not help but remain silent. Although he knew that the Qin family was declining over the years, Qin Xinhe had been doing his best to shield him from the wind and rain, until he was hunched and his temples were pale. This kind of kindness, but any individual will not be indifferent. Uncle 13 Daoxian in this life must inherit the legacy of his ancestors and live up to his ancestors and future generations. Qin Daoxian said firmly. Hearing this, Qin Xinhe stared at him with red eyes, and finally nodded heavily. "I am lucky to have a junior like you in my Qin family." Chapter 10. Boom Boom Boom. With the activation of the pattern on the broken dragon stone, the stone wall was slowly opened. With the opening of the family secret cave, a burst of aura shone. Standing outside the secret room, Qin Daoxian was almost blinded by the aura on these spirit stones. This? He looked at the patriarch Qin Xianhe with a shocked face, and saw a smug smile on the other side's face. That expression seemed to say, "You kid is scared." Qin Daoxian pursed his lips and tried his best to put on a calm expression, but the twitching of his cheeks from time to time revealed his excited heart. The family is so rich. There are so many spiritual stones, I am afraid there are 10,000, right? He looked at the spiritual stones neatly stacked on the shelf and couldn't help thinking. In the secret room, in addition to spirit stones, there are also some precious spirit minerals. In addition to copper ore and some common first-order spirit minerals, Qin Daoxian even sensed the aura fluctuations of second-order spirit minerals. Gollum. Qin Daoxian's Adam's apple rolled and he couldn't help swallowing. This is all the savings of my Qin family for 300 years, shocking, right? Qin Xian's slightly sighed voice sounded in Qin Daoxian's ears. When I took over the position of the patriarch, the first time I saw these things, my reaction was similar to yours. Uncle 13, what's going on here? Didn't you say that the family is very poor? And since the family has so many spiritual stones, why did you give up your practice? If you replace these things with training resources, you will definitely be able to improve your life. Further. Qin Daoxian seemed to think of something and said eagerly. Obviously, in his heart, he has always been haunted by Qin Xian's giving up his practice. He thought that Qin Xianhe gave up his practice for his own sake. You're right. Qin Xianhe nodded. It is true that replacing these things with cultivation resources will allow me to further improve my cultivation. If I am lucky, it is not impossible for me to step into the 9th level of qi refining, but then what? Can I build a foundation? No. Qin Xianhe sighed. For a clan with low qualifications like me, it would be unwise to use up the accumulation of my Qin ancestors 300 years. Hearing these words, Qin Daoxian was speechless. Live up to the ancestors, live up to the descendants. Qin Xianhe is using his actions to set the best example for him, the descendant of the Qin family. In the face of such a 13th uncle, in the face of such a patriarch of the Qin clan, what else can Qin Daoxian say? Qin Daoxian did not say a word and bowed respectfully towards Qin Xianhe. Qin Xianhe calmly accepted Qin Daoxian's salute, and after a while he waved his hand. There are a total of 8,743 spirit stones here, and 635 caddies of various first-order spirit minerals, of which the most precious are 3A second-order spiritual mine. Qin Xianhe pointed to an exquisite wooden box in the far corner of the secret room. With the weight of these 3 second-order spiritual ore, I can barely make a second-order magic weapon, but my Qin family has been so many years, except for you, also failed to produce a refiner. Now, I give all of these things to you. After speaking, Qin Xianhe looked directly into Qin Daoxian's eyes, and after getting his affirmative look, he nodded gratified. Patriarch, I have a question. Say. After arranging some words, Qin Daoxian continued. Since there are so many spiritual stones in the family, why don't you train more disciples in the family? Hearing this, Qin Xianhe first nodded, then shook his head. I understand what you mean. Such a huge amount of wealth can indeed cultivate a few more monks for the family, so that the family can reproduce the prosperity of the immortal generation. But have you ever thought about how the cultivator's lifespan is only 120 years at most before the foundation building period? After this generation of cultivators has settled down, how can the Qin family, which has neither copper or veins nor family savings, continue? Seeing that Qin Daoxian did not speak, Qin Xianhe knew clearly that this kid definitely did not agree with the ideas of their older generation. But on second thought, Qin Xianhe was relieved again. Qin Daoxian is different from them. Qin Daoxian has good aptitude and talent for refining tools. He must think about doing everything in his power to develop and strengthen the family, rather than relying on the accumulation of generations to save a spiritual vein for the family. Daoxian, I know that you want to grow your family. Not only you but every generation of our Qin clan thinks this way, but you have to remember that the Xiuxin family wants to grow. In addition to the inheritance of exercises, the spiritual veins are the true foundation of a family. Spiritual veins? Qin Daoxian frowned. Yes, do you know why our Qin family can give birth to 13 monks of the immortal character generation? Qin Daoxian shook his head. It's just the 7 spiritual eyes in the family. Speaking of this, Qin Xianhe couldn't help but sigh. It may be the care of the ancestors, or it may be pure luck. The previous patriarch Qin Xianzhou discovered 4 spiritual eyes in a row in the Red Copper Mountains, plus the family's original 3 spiritual eyes. This gave birth to the grand occasion of the 13 monks of the Chen family. However, the spiritual eye is only rootless duckweed after all. Its appearance is irregular, and its exhaustion is also irregular. Qin Daoxian was deeply touched by what Uncle 13 said. Because at the beginning of his practice, there were 2 spiritual eyes in the family, he and Qin Xinhe were one. It was only when he reached the second level of qi refining that Uncle 13's spiritual eyes inexplicably dried up. At this point, only the last spiritual eye remained in the family. Seeing Qin Daoxian's expressive expression, Qin Xinhe continued, "The spiritual vein is different. As long as the family cultivator does not die, it will not be exhausted. A cultivator family, as long as they master one spiritual vein, it means that the family has the foundation of inheritance. It is a pity that although the spiritual veins of Wuxia are wide, there is not a single spiritual vein without a master." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian thought thoughtfully, "So, these savings of the family are trying to artificially give birth to a spiritual vein?" "That's right." Seeing that Qin Daoxian was dumbfounded, Qin Xinhe said with a smile, "I know you may think our ancestors are a little stupid. To artificially give birth to a spiritual vein, it not only needs to spend more than 100,000 spiritual stones, but also needs to put down Yinling de array. But if our Qin family wants to truly gain a foothold in Wuxia, there is no other way than to master a spiritual vein." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was silent. He knew that Qin Xinhe was right. Only with spiritual veins can we cultivate spiritual fields, plant spiritual medicines, and keep spirit beasts. The most important thing is that only with spiritual veins can the cultivators of the Qin family have enough spiritual energy to practice. Instead of being like Qin Daoxian now, every day he practiced he was trembling with fear, for fear that the spiritual eyes in the cave would be exhausted. As Uncle 13 said, this feeling is like rootless duckweed. Qin Daoxian hates the feeling that his destiny is out of his control. He wants to change all this. Chapter 11. Put the spirit stone in the storage bag. Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe walked out of the secret room. In the hall of the cave residence, the uncle and nephew were sitting opposite each other, and there was a set of tea sets on the tea table in front of them. Qin Xinhe was making tea for Qin Daoxian. The clear tea flowed into the teacup from the mouth of the teapot, and the fragrance of the tea was overflowing. Qin Daoxian smelled the tea fragrance and felt that his consciousness was a little more active. Obviously, this was not ordinary tea but a kind of spiritual tea. Seeing Qin Daoxian's greedy look on his face, Qin Xinhe smiled and handed the teacup over and said, "Try it. This restorative tea is one of the few good things for your 13th uncle and me. Then nephew, it's better to be respectful than to obey." After taking the teacup, Qin Daoxian drank the peony in one gulp, and smashed his mouth after drinking it. "How?" Qin Xinhe asked while drinking tea. "Fragrant." Seeing Uncle 13 staring at him, Qin Daoxian immediately said embarrassingly, "The consciousness seems to be soaked in warm water, very comfortable." "That's right. Restorative tea is of great benefit to the spiritual consciousness of monks. Drinking it for a long time has the effect of increasing the spiritual consciousness of monks." Speaking of this, Qin Xinhe laughed at himself. Everyone thinks that our cultivators are people who live in the wind and eat the food and eat qi. How can they think that our cultivators are not eating but poor and can't afford it? He looked at the restorative tea on the table and continued, "Just this small pot of restorative tea is worth 50 spirit stones." Puff. Cough cough cough. Qin Daoxian just poured and drank the second cup of restorative tea by himself. Hearing the terrifying price, he suddenly choked and coughed. 50 spirit stones? So expensive. Qin Daoxian stared with a look of disbelief. Qin Xinhe said to himself, "Let's not talk about Ling Cha. The monks of the big family will eat Lingmi on weekdays. You should know that the long-term consumption of Lingmi by monks has the effect of warming and nourishing the body. In Guang'an Prefecture, even if it is first-order spiritual corn and corn, the price reaches 5 spiritual stones per pound. How can ordinary monks afford it? Not to mention that there are all kinds of spirit pills, spirit fruits, spirit wines and even other rare treasures that can assist in cultivation, and all these require spirit stones." Qin Daoxian was silent. He knew that Uncle 13 said so much to tell him that once he had enough spiritual stones, he must first cultivate the spiritual veins. Because as long as there is a spiritual vein, all the cultivation resources he mentioned can be obtained slowly by relying on the spiritual vein. Uncle 13 Daoxian understands what you mean. After the item refining workshop is completed and I earn spirit stones, I will give birth to spirit vessels as soon as possible. Qin Daoxian vowed to guarantee. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's attitude, Qin Xinhe didn't say more, and he immediately changed the topic. Daoxian, do you have any thoughts on the future development of the family? This is the first time Qin Xinhe took the initiative to chat with Qin Daoxian about the family's development plan. In the past, Qin Xinhe didn't worry about Qin Daoxian very much about the family affairs. He told Qin Daoxian that his most important task was to learn the craftsmanship and strive to become a craftsman at an early date. Now that Qin Daoxian is a first-order craftsman, Qin Xinhe, who is getting older, has to consider the issue of training successors. Hearing this question, Qin Daoxian knew that Uncle 13 was testing him. After sorting out his thoughts, Qin Daoxian said, Patriarch, I think the most important thing for the family now is to build the refining workshop, and around the establishment of the refining workshop, we need to do 3 preparations. Which 3? First, investigate the market for the sale of instruments in Guang'an Prefecture. Second, purchase or raw materials for the construction of refining workshops and refining instruments. Third, lease and sell finished instruments in Guang'an Prefecture. Qin Daoxian explained his thoughts on how to develop the family over the years. Qin Xinhe listened to his narration, sometimes slapped the table and praised, and sometimes interrupted to correct. In the continuous discussion between the uncle and nephew, the rough development plan of the Qin family for the next few years was gradually finalized by the two. To sum it up in one sentence, in the next 5 years, the focus of family development will revolve around the smithing workshop. And Qin Daoxian is the core executor of this development plan. Because he is the only one in the Qin family who can refine tools, and only he can refine the unique Rongling furnace. Before I knew it, the resting tea in the teapot was empty. Qin Daoxian shook the teapot and found that the tea was clean, so he could not help but slap his mouth. Putting down the teapot in embarrassment, he thought bitterly, in the future when the family is rich, he must buy Yangshan tea to take a bath. Okay, now that this matter has been finalized, tomorrow in the clan association, I will use the clan chief's decree to announce this development plan in public. Qin Xinhe concluded. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's expression of hesitating to speak, Qin Xinhe retracted his gesture of preparing to see off the guest and asked, What, is there anything else? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian said sternly, Patriarch, Daoxian thinks that while developing the refining workshop, the cultivation of the family's children must also keep up. Our Qin family can't always rely on you and me. He knew in his heart that what Qin Xianmen was thinking about was to save 100,000 spiritual stones, and then give birth to spiritual veins. Qin Daoxian believes that there is no conflict between cultivating family children and promoting spiritual veins, but the premise of all this is that the refining workshop can earn a lot of spiritual stones. Otherwise, whether it's cultivating family children or giving birth to spiritual veins, it's just a matter of passing eyes and dreams. Hearing Qin Daoxuan's suggestion, Qin Xinhe hesitated. He thought for a while, then shook his head and said, This matter is put on hold for further discussion, but I can promise you that as long as the spirit stones earned by the refining workshop reach a certain level, the family child training program and the spirit vein birth generation program can be launched at the same time. But there is one thing, the spiritual pulse generation plan must be placed before the family children training plan. Okay. Qin Daoxian nodded, but what? Qin Xinhe stared and found that Qin Daoxuan's usual obedience was pretending, but in fact this kid has more ideas than anyone else. Qin Daoxian said embarrassingly, How many spirit stones does this artifact refining workshop earn each year to meet the standard? 13th uncle, you have to give me a specific number, right? Since you insist on cultivating family children, then I will give you a standard. If the annual net profit of the refining workshop can reach more than 3,000 spirit stones, I will agree to your request. Hearing this assurance, Qin Daoxian was overjoyed, stood up excitedly and said, It's a promise, let's swear it by high fives. Go away. They'll kick you. Seeing that he was neither big nor small, Qin Xinhe immediately blew his beard and stared, ready to fight. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian ran away without saying a word, and left the cave in a hurry. Seeing Qin Daoxian walking happily, Qin Xinhe couldn't help showing a smile on his pretending to be angry face. Stinky boy, ha! Chapter 12. Southwest Waters of Wuxia. The turbulent sea slapped on a jet-black cargo ship, making a rushing sound. Qin Daoxian stood on the deck, looked at the boundless sea, turned to look at the patriarch Qin Xian and said, Uncle 13, is this the family's Canglong cargo ship? Haha, yes, that's it. Qin Xian clung to the mast of the Canglong, it's your first time on a boat, right? Qin Daoxian nodded. Although Qin Daoxian was a human being, it was the first time for him to sail in the sea by boat, and it felt a little novel for a while. The sea voyage is a little novel at first, but after a long time, you will feel tired. We have a long way to go to Lingbei Island. Even at the speed of the Zhanglong, it will take at least a month. Qin Xinhe was right, but Qin Daoxian felt bored after only watching a stick of incense. In addition to the azure blue water, it is still azure blue water, and there is nothing surprising. As if thinking of something, Qin Daoxian asked, Uncle 13, didn't you always say that Wuxia is dangerous and that there are often monsters in the sea? That's when you are running around. In fact, on a fixed route, the Wuxia Sea area is still very safe. After all, monsters also have intelligence. They know where it is safe and where it is dangerous. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help being stunned. He originally wondered if there would be one or two monsters sprang out on this trip, giving him a chance to slay monsters and slay demons. The result seems to be that he thinks too much. Time passes day by day. The days of sailing at sea were simply boring. After experiencing the initial novelty, Qin Daoxian simply hid in the cabin all day to practice. It's just that there is no spiritual eye on the boat, he can only absorb the free spiritual energy in the refining air, and the speed of cultivation is very slow. In the end, Qin Daoxian, who couldn't bear this kind of speed, simply gave up his practice and switched to comprehension to learn spells. For cultivators in the Qi refining period, the main means of defending against the enemy are spells, instruments, and spirit talismans. Needless to say, magic tools and spirit talismans need to be purchased with spirit stones, which are foreign objects. In addition, monks also have a way to exert their own strength, that is, magic. The great division of spells is the same as that of instruments, which can also be divided into first order, second order, and third order. It's just that different from the magic weapon, the spells of each grade are not divided into grades. For example, the first order fire control spell mastered by Qin Daoxian, the fire control skills practiced by the first level Qi refining monks and the 9th level Qi refining monks are essentially the same. There is no distinction between the first order low-quality fire control technique and the first order high-quality fire control technique. But the same level of spells, different people practice, the results are also different. In the world of practice, monks generally divide the results of spell cultivation into 4 levels: entry, minor, major, and consummation. For a Qi cultivator, it is very easy to get started with a spell. Even a person with a dull understanding can spend a few months to get started with a first order spell. But the follow-up cultivation of spells is not so simple. Qin Daoxian has practiced for 5 years, and so far he has only mastered 2 spells. One is the wind fighting technique for rushing the road, and the other is the fire control technique for refining tools. As for the spells of combat and defense, Qin Daoxian did not learn a single one. It's not that Qin Daoxian's talent in magic is poor, but his energy is limited. In the past 5 years, Qin Daoxian has not only majored in Guiyuan Gong, but also studied the art of refining. The most important thing is that he has to develop Rongling from scratch. Furnace. No matter how talented he is, he really doesn't have the energy to practice other combat spells. Of course, this does not mean that Qin Daoxian has no means of confronting the enemy. Because in addition to magic to defend against the enemy, the more important way for cultivators to defend against the enemy is the magic weapon. As an artifact refiner who had once refined first-order high-grade artifacts, how could Qin Daoxian be short of artifacts? In his storage bag, there is now a first-order high-grade magic weapon. It was the only first-order high-grade magic weapon he had refined, and it was a water attribute flying sword, called the Flying Snow Sword. Ever since Feishua's sword was refined by him, it had been acting as his trump card, and had been tightly hidden in his storage bag. Even his uncle Qin Xinhe didn't know that Qin Daoxian had such a whole card in his hand. However, the power of the Flying Snow Sword is great, but it also consumes a lot of infuriating energy. Qin Daoxian had tried it, and if he was on the 2nd level of Qi refining, if he made Feishuajian with all his strength, he could at most use 3 swords, and his true Qi would be consumed 7 to 78. Although his cultivation base has now risen to the 3rd level of Qi refining, but if he can use 1 more sword at most, he will run out of true Qi and be slaughtered by others. The 10th day of the voyage at sea. Qin Daoxian, who was sitting cross-legged in the cabin, closed his eyes. He looked at the 10-star dust revolving around the golden scriptures in the sea of consciousness, and he couldn't help feeling excited. Really? As long as you recite the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, once a day, 1 stardust will be stored in the sea of consciousness. For 10 consecutive days, 10 stardust will be stored in exchange for an opportunity for epiphany. After these days of trying, Qin Daoxian has figured out the law of storing stardust. First, no matter how many times the Hongmeng Enlightenment Sutra is recited silently every day, at most 1 stardust can be stored. As for the many times of recitation of the scriptures, only the consumed consciousness can be restored as before. Second, stardust can only be stored up to 10 pieces. If Qin Daoxian insists not to use them, they will always revolve around the golden scriptures. Third, 10 stardust collided and merged into one, which could greatly enhance Qin Daoxian's comprehension and produce an effect similar to epiphany. He had a certain feeling that these 10 stardusts were this unknown scripture called Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic, forcibly stored his usual understanding, and then waited until the 10th day to concentrate on use. When this thought came to his mind, Qin Daoxian himself was taken aback. He had heard of saving money and food, and this was the first time he had heard that comprehension could also be stored. But no matter what, the fact is that Qin Daoxian can only regard the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic as his biggest secret and keep it firmly. During these days on the ship, although Qin Daoxian could not practice Guiyuan Gong, he did not waste time but thought of practicing a new spell. If other chi-refining cultivators had heard these words, they would probably have laughed Big Tooth off. Although it is not difficult to get started with first-order spells, 1 month is not enough to cultivate it to a certain level. In fact, if a cultivator in the chi-refining stage can introduce a spell to entry within a month, it is quite good. If you want to cultivate a spell to a small success within a month, even Tianlingen cultivator cannot do it. Normally, it takes at least a year for a monk to cultivate a first-order spell to a small success. And if you want to cultivate a spell to the end, it takes at least 5 years. As for the level of consummation, it is no longer a level that can be achieved by spending time. This requires cultivators to have extraordinary understanding. Generally speaking, a monk has completely mastered a spell, which means that the monk has cultivated the spell to the realm of great success. Chapter 13. Inside the cabin. Qin Daoxian, who opened his eyes, played with the jade slip in his hand and fell into contemplation. This jade slip, which he asked for from Uncle 13 10 days ago, is said to be the inheritance of a sword art that the family exchanged from the Qinyuan sword sect with their military exploits. The rank of this sword art is not high, it is only comparable to first-order spells. However, it is one of the most basic sword techniques of Qinyuan sword sect, and it is said to be a must-learn sword technique for disciples entering the sect. Not caring about the 10 stars in the sea of knowledge, Qin Daoxian immediately took out a red flying sword from his storage bag, which was the red shadow flying sword he had refined the most. Under the profusion of infuriating qi, a 3-foot-long sword light erupted from the tip of the red shadow Feijian. Under the oppression of Jianmeng, the air was visibly distorted. This kind of power has almost reached the limit of a first-order low-grade flying sword. Looking at the flying sword he made by himself, Qin Daoxian nodded with satisfaction. The sword glows 3 feet, not bad. Although the rank of the magic weapon is distinguished by the number of superimposed arrays, after the fusion of the array pattern of the magic weapon is introverted, and outsiders cannot see how many arrays are superimposed on this magic weapon. However, it is not accurate enough to judge the aura of the magic weapon. Sometimes, if the magic weapon is only a small level, it is easy to identify errors. Judging only by the power of the magic weapon is the most accurate. After all, magic weapons are used to fight, and combat power is the only criterion for judging the rank of magic weapons. Compared with the artifact refiners using the pattern to divide the grades of the instruments, ordinary monks still prefer to use the power of the instruments to divide the grades of the instruments. Take flying swords as an example. 3 feet of sword light is the limit of the power of the first-order low-grade flying sword. If it exceeds this limit, it can barely be called a first-order middle-grade magic weapon. As for Qin Daoxian's Fei Shui sword, when his true qi was poured in, the sword glow even faintly surpassed 9 feet. Converted to the unit of length in his previous life, it was a 3-meter-long sword glow. Once this kind of powerful flying sword is sacrificed, it is truly terrifying. Putting away the jade slip, Qin Daoxian planned to use the sword fighting technique in the chasing wind sword to use the red shadow flying sword. I see. The red shadow flying sword flew up and down under his control, and within a short while the cabin was filled with the sword qi and the lingering sword light. A half-column incense was cast. The red shadow flying sword flew back to Qin Daoxian's hands like a swallow returning to its nest. Feeling the hot breath emanating from the red shadow Feijian, A smile appeared on Qin Daoxuan's face. Yes, I didn't expect that it only took me 10 days to get started with the wind-chasing sword art. The wind-chasing sword art was the first attacking spell he practiced, and Qin Daoxian was very satisfied with such good results. You must know that he started this sword art in 10 days, relying entirely on himself, not the help of Goldfinger. This kind of achievement, even among the disciples of Qinyuan Jianzong's Chi-refining stage, is considered a genius-level figure. After using it for a while, Qin Daoxian found that using the wind-chasing sword art to make Feijian the envoy, the speed of the red shadow Feijian was 3 points faster than usual, and the overall power of Feijian increased by 10%. Don't underestimate the increase in power. You must know that this is only the effect of this sword art just getting started. According to the records of this sword art, if the sword art is cultivated to a small degree, the power of the flying sword can be increased by 30% out of thin air, and if it is cultivated to a large degree, it can be increased by 60%. As for the perfect state, the language in the jade slip is unclear. It is estimated that even the person who created it thinks that no one can cultivate this sword art to the perfect state during the Qi refining period. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian took a deep breath. After 10 days of hard training, you will be able to start practicing the wind-chasing sword art. If you have an epiphany, what exaggerated effects will it have? Qin Daoxian was looking forward to it in his heart. Just do it. Qin Daoxian immediately stopped controlling the 10 stardust in the sea of consciousness and let them collide together. As the 10 stardust merged into one, Qin Daoxian felt the familiar consciousness rise again. Soon, the Big Bang-like scene came to his eyes again. With the explosion, countless light clusters rushed out from the depths of his sea of consciousness and spread in front of Qin Daoxian. As soon as his mind moved, a light group emitting a dim light floated in front of him. Click on the light group, and what is recorded in it is the wind-chasing sword art that he has learned in the past 10 days. Really? In reality, a smile involuntarily appeared on Qin Daoxuan's face with his eyes closed. As the light group was opened, countless insights about the wind-chasing sword technique poured into Qin Daoxuan's mind, making him feel like he was stunned. It turns out that this should be done in the process of Envoy Feijian, chasing the wind and chasing the wind, so that's what it means. I see. With the accumulation of insights, Qin Daoxuan's attainment of the wind-chasing sword art is also improving visibly to the naked eye. Soon, the time for a stick of incense passed. As the tide of perception receded, Qin Daoxian withdrew from this state of epiphany. Opening his eyes, a feeling of incomparable loss appeared in his heart. He had a hunch that as long as the state of epiphany just now continued, he would definitely be able to cultivate the wind-chasing sword art to a level of perfection that almost no cultivator in the Qi refining period could achieve. Pity? But immediately, Qin Daoxian adjusted his mentality. Anyway, this kind of epiphany is once every 10 days and it will take another 10 days. Thinking of this, his lost mood improved again. Now, let me see how this epiphany works. Qin Daoxian couldn't wait to take out the red shadow Feijian from the storage bag again. With the excitation of the red shadow flying sword, the flying sword flew through the air like a rainbow. The sound of flying swords breaking through the air has become smaller. Qin Daoxian soon discovered the difference between the Imperial Envoy Feijian this time. Before a stick of incense, when he was flying the sword, he would make a clear snort. Qin Daoxian knew that it was the sound of the air being torn apart. But this time, Feijian's chi-chi sound is gone. The red shadow flying sword flies in the cabin like a smart swimming fish, but its flying speed is countless times faster than the swimming fish in the sea. In this realm, it is clearly that the wind-chasing sword art recorded in the jade slip has achieved the effect after Xiaoqing, and it has not just reached the Xiaoqing realm, but has walked a considerable distance from the Xiaoqing realm. Qin Daoxian reckoned that his current attainment of the wind-chasing sword art was probably not far from the Deshang realm. So horrible. Is this the effect of 10 times the superposition of comprehension? When he created the spirit fusion method before, he didn't have a deep understanding of this epiphany state. After all, it was the first time that the fusion spirit formation method came out, and he didn't know how difficult it was to create this formation method. But now he knows. Even a person like him who believes that his talent in swordsmanship is not bad, if he wants to reach the current state in the wind-chasing sword art, he will not even think about it in 2 or 3 years. But now, just a stick of incense saves him the hard work of 2 or 3 years of sword art practice. It really deserves to be the Hongmeng Enlightenment Classic. For the first time, Qin Daoxian was convinced by the name of this scripture. Boom! Just as he sighed, a suffocating sense of oppression emerged in Qin Daoxuan's heart. What happened? Qin Daoxian immediately rushed out of the cabin with the flying sword, and when he looked up, a cloud slowly covered the Canglong. Chapter 14. After leaving the cabin, the deck of the Canglong was already in chaos. The panicked shouts of the clansmen kept reaching Qin Daoxian's ears. Patriarch, a giant boat is flying towards us in the sky. Patriarch. Wow. Qin Xianhe said nothing, raised his head to look at the giant ship flying towards them above his head, his face dignified. After a while he looked at Qin Daoxian, who ran out of the cabin, and said, "Take care of your clansmen, please don't panic. This is the Spirit Void battleship that patrols the waterway of the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture." Spirit Void battleship. Qin Daoxian read it silently and nodded. After explaining Qin Daoxian, Qin Xianhe used the wind-fighting technique and flew towards the huge ship above his head. Compared with the incomparably huge hull on the sky, Qin Xian's stature is as small as floating. Qin Daoxian didn't bother to look at it, and hurriedly reassured the panicked clansmen, and asked the clansmen to lower the sails and slowly stop the Canglong. The sky above the Canglong. Qin Xian's figure continued to rise until it was flush with the Lingshu battleship. He took a deep breath, cupped his hands and said solemnly, "Clan Chief Qin on Xuangu Island, this trip is going to Guang'an Prefecture to buy supplies. This is my passage token." After finishing speaking, Qin Xianhe took out a black token from the storage bag, injected infuriating energy, and threw it at the Spirit Void battleship. The Spirit Void battleship is white as a hole, and I don't know what kind of material it is made of. In addition to the visible appearance of the entire battleship, the interior is completely shrouded in a fog, which cannot be seen clearly, giving people a huge sense of oppression. Qin Xianhe didn't know which base-building cultivator of the Zhou family was in charge of this battleship, so he had to honestly present the passage token according to the rules. About half a cup of tea. A black token flew out from inside the battleship. As soon as Qin Xianhe received the token, he heard a voice ringing in his ear, "Fellow Taoist, remember not to deviate from the safe waterway, otherwise my Guang'an House Zhou family will not be responsible for any danger. Remember this, Junior." Qin Xianhe quickly bowed to respond. Boom. Soon, in the eyes of everyone, the Spirit Void battleship quickly lifted off, roaring and disappearing into the sky. Call? Watching the behemoth leave, Qin Xianhe could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Returning to the deck of the Canglong, Qin Xianhe instructed again, "Let the clansmen raise the sails and we will move on." "Yes, Patriarch." Qin Daoxian nodded and hurriedly ordered the people to set sail. When the Canglong sailed normally, Qin Daoxian, full of doubts, walked up to Qin Xianhe and asked, "Uncle 13, what was that just now?" "It's the Zhou family's Spirit Void battleship," Qin Xianhe said with a smile. "Didn't you ask me before why we haven't encountered monster attacks along the way? That's the reason." Qin Xianhe pointed to the Spirit Void battleship road that had disappeared in the clouds on the horizon. "You mean the Zhou family is protecting the waterway?" "Of course. Otherwise, where do you think the prosperity of Guang'an Prefecture came from?" Hearing this, Qin Daoxian immediately understood. The Zhou family is the largest family in the sea area with a radius of 100,000 miles. It is rumored that the ancestors of the Zhou family have reached the perfection of Zifu, and they are only one step away from the legendary Jindan real person. Such a huge immortal clan naturally has the strength to protect the waterway of this 10,000 li sea area from being invaded by monsters. Besides, only when the waterway is safe can commerce and trade be prosperous, and the Zhou family of Guang'an Prefecture can obtain the greatest benefits. The ruler always wants the world to be peaceful, and only the ambitious bottom is afraid that the world will not be chaotic. Of course, no one can do absolute protection. After all, those monsters who are not in the rank are low in intelligence and are no different from beasts. They don't know where they are safe and where they are dangerous. Not to mention the so-called safe waterway, it was Lingbei Island, the base camp of the Zhou family, and these low-level monsters who were stimulated by the blood of mortals dared to go there. It's just that these monsters are usually only for mortal warriors to eat. Purple House family. Qin Daoxian couldn't help but whisper, "It's really majestic." "Its Majesty," Qin Xianhe said with emotion. The ancestors of the Zhou family caught up with the good times and stood in the right position in the war when Qinyuan Jianzong occupied Wangxinghai 1,000 years ago, which laid the foundation for the millennium prosperity of the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture. Even 500 years ago, the chaos of the gods in Wanxinghai cut off the inheritance of countless immortal clans, but the Zhou family survived tenaciously, which shows the depth of the Zhou family in Guang'an. Speaking of the largest immortal family in the sea area of 100,000 miles, the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture, Qin Ziyan's tone was full of envy. In fact, it's not just him. In the sea area of 10,000 miles, any cultivator family has this attitude when talking about the Zhou family in Guang'an Mansion. There is envy and awe, and even jealousy does not dare to arise. God's chaos. Qin Daoxian keenly captured the new knowledge points in Qin Ziyan's words. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's extremely puzzled expression, Qin Xinhe explained, "That was a loose cultivator 500 years ago who called himself a goddess and a real person, and got a big opportunity somewhere, and caused chaos for the Sea of Stars for 100 years. After a long time, in the end, Qinyuan Jianzong shot and strangled him. Since then, Qinyuan Jianzong launched a war against the Izumo kingdom of Xianyunsu. This war lasted for 400 years. Talking about the war between Qinyuan Jianzong and Izumo, Qin Xinhe seemed to remember some bad memories, and his voice gradually weakened. Seeing that Uncle 13's sad memories were touched, Qin Daoxian did not dare to ask any more questions. The next 20 days were calm. Neither encountered the Zhou family's spirit void battleship, nor encountered the harassment of monsters. 20 days later, an old voice sounded from outside the cabin, and Qin Daoxian heard it. It was the voice of the 13th uncle Qin Xinhe. "Daoxian, Lingbei Island is here." Hearing this sentence, Qin Daoxian was excited. After drifting in the sea for a full month, Raoshirt Songlong is not an ordinary cargo ship, but a modified cargo ship engraved with wind-gathering arrays and water-avoiding arrays, and its speed far exceeds that of ships on Earth. Qin Daoxian couldn't take it anymore. It wasn't because that Songlong was bumpy or boring to navigate, but because of the lack of spiritual energy. He couldn't practice Guiyuan Gong for a month, and he didn't make any progress in his cultivation. For a cultivator, the most uncomfortable thing is not being able to make progress. Qin Daoxian finally felt Qin Ziyan's feelings now. He just couldn't cultivate for a month, but Qin Xinhe gave up cultivation completely. The two are not the same concept at all. Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but admire the 13th uncle even more. Get out of the cabin. A scene where the sails covered the sky and the sun appeared in front of him, and as soon as he entered his eyes, all the white sails were densely packed. In the sky, there are monks flying with swords from time to time, passing light after another. Qin Daoxian knew that those who escaped from the light were monks above the foundation establishment stage. And the cultivators in the Qi refining period were all waiting in their respective ships, queuing up to enter the port honestly. The Qin family did not have foundation-building cultivators, so naturally, like most Qi refining cultivators, they queued up honestly. Chapter 15. 2 hours later. Songlong berthed into port. After a month of wandering, Qin Daoxian finally stepped on the ground. Is this Guang'an House? Looking at the crowds of people around him and the pedestrians rubbing shoulders, Qin Daoxian couldn't help but said, "Yes, this is Guang'an Mansion." Seeing this most prosperous city with a radius of 100,000 miles, Qin Xinhe couldn't help but feel emotional. In Qin Daoxuan's view, the prosperity of Guang'an Prefecture is more like a coastal city of modern civilization than the ancient society of the previous life. First of all, the city has no walls similar to ancient times and is a completely open city. Secondly, there are too many buildings in the city, one after another: residential houses, restaurants, inns, commercial houses. There is no limit to everything. Got off the boat. Qin Daoxian found that on the dock, a group of mortals dressed in strange clothes were carrying sacks and carrying goods to the cloud-traversing beast car without stopping. They were shackled and walked with difficulty, and behind every dozens of porters, a mortal warrior with a leather whip in his hand seemed to be watching over them. Qin Daoxuan's consciousness swept away. It was found that what was in the sack was actually food. Parallel Qin Xinhe followed Qin Daoxuan's gaze and explained, "That is a mortal prisoner of war from Izumo. After being bought by some loose cultivators and small families, they acted as slaves." Use mortals as slaves? For a long time, Qin Daoxian thought that mortals only provided monks with reproductive tools to cultivate the seeds of immortality. Unexpectedly, there are monks who take mortals as slaves. Seeing to see his doubts, Qin Xinhe smiled and said, "Of course, we monks can do it without eating or drinking, but mortals can't." In addition to the large number of monks from their own clan, the mortal population in their clan is extremely large. Take the Zhou family as an example. Their own mortal population is in the tens of millions, and such a huge mortal base cannot be supported by the food produced by Lingbei Island alone. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian instantly understood. Most of these Izumo slaves in front of them were serfs of the Wan Xinghai monk. Loose cultivators relied on serfs to reclaim deserted islands and plant food, and the cultivators exchanged the spiritual stones of Weibo for these food to feed their huge population, and both sides took what they needed. This is also one of the sources for loose cultivators to obtain spirit stones. As for why the Qin family on Jianghu Island did not develop this industry, Qin Daoxian glanced at the old 13th uncle and immediately understood the reason. It's not that the Qin family is kind-hearted, but that they have enough energy and the number of cultivators in the Qin family is too small. In addition to dealing with family affairs, Qin Xinhe also has to protect the safety of the people in Chongqing County. How can I have the energy to engage in these side jobs? Moreover, most of the mortal prisoners of war in Izumo were warriors. Without the suppression of monks, it was difficult to ensure that these serfs would not rebel and defect by relying only on ordinary Qin clan members. In addition, the return of ordinary food in exchange for spirit stones is too low, which is quite tasteless. The Qin family also did not develop this industry. As if thinking of something, Qin Daoxian continued to ask, these slaves were originally members of some immortal cultivating families in Izumo, right? Hearing this, Qin Xinhe was silent at first and then nodded, that's right. We have fought the war between Wan Xinghai and Izumo for more than 400 years. Fortunately, we have been on the offensive, so most of the victims were from Izumo. Mortal. Among these mortals, most of the men were sold as serfs, and the women became the tools for the various immortal races to reproduce. In a few words, Qin Xinhe sketched out a cruel world of immortal cultivation for Qin Daoxian. There has never been anything beautiful here, and some are just more brutal killings than in the previous life. The monks used more cruel methods than the previous life to compete for resources. This is the sadness of weakness. No matter whether it is a past life or this life, there is no difference. Qin Daoxian thought to himself. Seeing Qin Daoxian's ugly expression, Qin Xinhe still did not stop talking. As the future patriarch of the Qin family on Jianghu Island, there are some things that he must bear. I didn't tell him this before so that he could concentrate on learning the artifact refining. It didn't mean that Qin Daoxian could escape. Is it a sin to be weak? When Qin Xinhe heard this, he was stunned for a moment, then nodded and affirmed, yes, in this world being weak is guilty. The crowd went all the way. Qin Xinhe placed the accompanying clan behind an inn in Guang'an Prefecture. He took Qin Daoxian towards the inner city of Guang'an Mansion. As the two of them moved towards the inner city, Qin Daoxian found that the number of monks was increasing. In the end, almost no mortals could be seen and all the monks were monks. Although Guang'an Prefecture is a city where immortals and mortals live together, monks and mortals don't actually live together. The inner city of Guang'an Prefecture we are going to now is the real immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. Along the way, Qin Xinhe walked and said, really? As the team continued to move forward, a tall city wall appeared in front of the two of them. City gate. A monk wearing a cyan robe with a fiery red spirit bead embroidered on the robe blocked the way for the two of them. Stop, please pay the entrance tax. Hearing this, Qin Xinhe took out 2 spirit stones from the storage bag and handed them over. Go in. The Zhou family cultivator waved his hand and let the two enter the city gate. Qin Daoxian looked behind him, and there was almost no end in sight of a long line. Just entered the city gate. Qin Daoxian seemed to have entered another world, and the concentration of aura suddenly soared tenfold. This is... Seeing Qin Daoxian's shocked expression, Qin Xinhe next to him explained, this is the spiritual vein. Under the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, there is a third-order spiritual vein buried, so we just stepped into the country and felt the aura is overwhelming. Looking at the sky, Qin Xian congratulated, let's find an inn to stay first. Every night in the Xianqing of Guang'an Prefecture, there will be monks from the Zhou family to clean up the monks who do not have the right to live, so as to prevent the loose cultivators from coming here to take a breath. There are 2 types of housing rentals in Xianqing, Guang'an Prefecture, short-term rentals and long-term rentals. The short-term rental is an inn and the general lease term is less than 1 month. If the lease term is more than 1 month, the monks often choose to find the Zhou family to rent the cave, because the price is cheaper than the short-term rental inn. Due to the abundant spiritual energy of Guang'an Prefecture, the price of the inn here is also very touching. Qin Xinhe and the two only opened 2 rooms, and they paid a rent of 20 spirit stones for 10 days. On average, one person needs 1 spirit stone a day. This is only the inn with the lowest concentration of aura. It is rumored that Guang'an Immortal Mansion also offers 4 grades of cave houses, A, B, C, and D. The living environment and the concentration of aura are different for each grade of cave mansion. I don't know what price of spirit stone is needed to rent the highest grade cave. Of course, the monks who can afford to rent a grade A cave residence are either the children of other immortal cultivators, or they are loose cultivators with a special skill. Ordinary loose cultivators and children of small families would not even dare to think about it. Chapter 16. The next day. Qin Daoxian, who had finished his cultivation early, started to investigate the market of instruments in Guang'an Prefecture according to the plan. The immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture is mainly divided into 4 areas: the core business area, the scattered Xiufang city, the Dongfu rental area, and the residence of the Zhou family monks who are in charge of this immortal city. The areas we mainly investigate today are the core business district and the Sangxiafang city. Needless to say, the core business district is the most prosperous district in the entire immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, where an inch of land is expensive, and most of the shops are priceless. If you want to buy a shop in this prosperous business district, only Lingshire is not enough, someone must be willing to sell it. Most of the shops in the core business area are in the hands of the Zhou family and several major foundation building families, and it is difficult for ordinary monks to get in. As for Sangxiafang city, on the other hand, it is a commercial area dominated by scattered cultivators and small families. There are few shops here and most of them are scattered repairers who set up stalls. As we all know, loose cultivators are generally very poor, their faces are clean, and their spending power is naturally far less than that of the children of big families. However, although the personal wealth of the loose cultivator is not comparable to that of the children of the big family, the number of loose cultivators is large. In terms of numbers, the number of scattered cultivators in the 100,000-mile sea area outnumbered the children of the family by dozens of times. Therefore, the seemingly chaotic Sangxiafang city has become the second most prosperous place in the entire immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture, second only to the core business district. Uncle 13, why don't you and I divide our troops into 2 separate ways, which can also speed up the investigation? Hearing this, Qin Xinhe thought for a while. All right. Discuss. Qin Xinhe chose to investigate the core business district, while Qin Daoxian went to Sangxiafang city, which the two were more optimistic about. Riding on a cloud-treading beast car, Qin Daoxian went to Sangxiafang city in Xianxing, Guang'an Prefecture. As soon as he entered the scattered repair shop, and before he got off the bus, the noise of the outside world, like cooking oil, entered Qin Daoxian's ears. Get out of the car after paying the fare. Qin Daoxian then carefully looked at the largest concentration of scattered cultivators in the sea area with a radius of 10,000 miles. Compared with the streets in the core business district, the streets here are much more spacious. It is not so much a street as it is a rectangular square. On both sides of the street, countless loose cultivators spread out a carpet, placed some goods on it and sold them one after another. It looks quite similar to the flea market in the previous life. In comparison, the shops on both sides of the street are much deserted, and the scattered repairers seem to prefer to shop for items on the street rather than go to the shop. Qin Daoxian thought for a while. Instead of visiting the more lively stalls, he walked towards the deserted shop. Tongbao Pavilion. Walking to a shop, looking at the plaque, Qin Daoxian walked in. It seems that there have been no customers for a long time. When the shopkeeper of Tongbao Pavilion saw a guest coming, he was stunned for a moment, then his face was full of smiles and he trotted forward. This fellow Taoist, I don't know what you want to buy? We have all kinds of magic tools, medicinal pills, spiritual talismans and spiritual rice here, and there are all kinds of spiritual materials to choose from. Seeing the customer, the shopkeeper of Tongbao Pavilion gave an introduction, for fear that Qin Daoxian had run away. After listening to the shopkeeper's introduction, Qin Daoxian probably knew that this store was a grocery store and basically sold everything, but it was unknown what the goods were. The shopkeeper is very kind. Qin Daoxian cupped his hands and pondered, I don't know how to sell the instruments in your store. The magic weapon. Hearing the magic weapon, the shopkeeper's eyes lit up. Big business. Different magic weapons have different prices. I don't know which level of magic weapon you want to buy. The first order magic weapon, the upper, middle and lower third grade flying swords each have a palm and eye. Qin Daoxian simply said. The shopkeeper heard the words and nodded. Friend, please follow me upstairs. After speaking, he made a gesture of please. On the second floor. The shopkeeper asked the servant in the store to serve tea, and I personally fetched the magic weapon for Qin Daoxian. About half a cup of tea time. According to Qin Daoxian's request, the shopkeeper brought 3 sword boxes. The sword boxes contained 3 flying swords from the first order low grade to the first grade high grade. Fellow Taoist, please see. The shopkeeper first opened the sword box on the far left, and a flickering blue flying sword came into view. This is the first order low grade flying sword, the Qingfeng sword. The sword's edge is extremely sharp. Infused with true energy, the sword can reach 2 feet. Qin Daoxian took the flying sword and injected infuriating energy. Suddenly, a sword light more than 2 feet long shot out from the tip of the sword. How? Qin Daoxian was non-committal and looked at the other 2 sword boxes. The shopkeeper didn't care either and opened the second sword box. Suddenly, a silver light came into view. This is a first-order mid-grade flying sword, the Silver Moon Sword. The whole body is made of silver moon stone. This sword can not only stimulate a 5-foot sword glow, but also has the characteristics of not being afraid of fire. It is the nemesis of fire magic. Seeing that Qin Daoxian was dissatisfied with the first flying sword, the shopkeeper hurriedly introduced the second flying sword. However, when Qin Daoxian saw the second flying sword, he was already vaguely aware of the magic weapon sold by this shop. Without waiting for the shopkeeper's introduction, he opened the third sword box by himself. Really? Qin Daoxian's face was full of disappointment, but his heart was filled with joy. Treasurer, why are the magic tools that your family sells secondhand? Seeing that Qin Daoxian broke the mystery in one sentence, the embarrassed look on the shopkeeper's face was fleeting. Qin Daoxian did not say nonsense. These 3 flying swords are all secondhand flying swords used by others, and they have been used for at least 5 years, and the charm on the flying swords has begun to dissipate. You must know that the service life of a general first-order magic weapon is only about 10 years. A flying sword has been used for 5 years, and it has reached half of its service life. Unless the price of this flying sword is extremely low, even casual cultivators are reluctant to buy it. Tao-friendly eyesight. Seeing Qin Daoxian see the way, the shopkeeper no longer hides it. The Feijian in our store is indeed a Feijian that was replaced by Tao, a son of the big family. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian took a sip of tea and waited for the next sentence. Seeing Qin Daoxian's indifferent attitude, the shopkeeper continued, Fellow Taoists should know that I, Wan Xinghai and Izumo have been at war, and the frontline's demand for magical tools has reached the point of burning eyebrows. That is, within the Wangxinghai, if you reach the 7 immortal cities on the front line, even second-hand flying swords of this quality would have been snapped up long ago. Hearing this nonsense, Qin Daoxian couldn't help sneering. Why doesn't the shopkeeper go to the front line to sell these flying swords? The shopkeeper said that the front line lacked magic tools. Thaxon. After all, magic tools have a service life, and fierce battles will drastically shorten the service life of magic tools. Wan Xinghai and Izumo have been fighting for hundreds of years, and it is obvious that the frontline magic tools are insufficient. But to say that the frontline monks are willing to buy any second-hand magic weapon, this is completely bluffing. Because the more monks are fighting on the front line, the higher the requirements for the quality of the instruments. After all, no one wants to lose their lives on the battlefield because of the poor quality of the instruments. You must know that even if Qinyuan Jianzong wanted monk Wan Xinghai to contribute and participate in the war with Izumo, they could only rely on various exercises and cultivation resources to attract them. Who dares to force the monks on the front line to use these inferior second-hand goods? Aren't you afraid that the monks will mutiny every minute? Seeing that Qin Daoxian could not be deceived, the shopkeeper had no choice but to keep reducing the price of Feijian, until finally the price of Qingfeng sword was reduced to 50 spirit stones, but Qin Daoxian still refused to let go. Since your shop doesn't have the magic weapon you want, don't bother anymore. After that, Qin Daoxian wanted to leave. Fellow Taoist, don't waste your time. Seeing that Qin Daoxian was reluctant to buy magic weapons in his store, the shopkeeper's attitude became colder. Whether it is in our scattered workshop city or the core business district, the probability of you being able to buy brand new magic tools is too low and too low. After finishing speaking, the shopkeeper said no more. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian paused and left the store with his hands over his shoulder. Chapter 17. Fellow Taoist is joking. If you have a way to buy a brand new magic weapon from an artifact refiner, our shop is willing to buy it at the market price. In Sangxiafeng City, in another magic weapon shop, the shopkeeper sneered coldly. When Qin Daoxian heard this, not only was he not angry but he smiled and said, "Farewell." Humph. Watching Qin Daoxian leave, the shopkeeper of the magic weapon shop looked bad. If it weren't for this place in Guang'an Mansion, a mere third-level chi refining cultivator, with such a scornful attitude, he might have taught him a lesson. Spent all morning. Qin Daoxian ran almost all the magic weapon shops in the entire Sangxiafeng city. There is only one conclusion. Guang'anfei's magical instrument market is in a state of severe shortage. Not to mention brand new magic weapons, even second-hand goods of slightly better quality will be snapped up by scattered repairers in a very short time, and they are still at the price of normal magic tools. Generally speaking, the price of a first-order magic weapon ranges from dozens of spirit stones to several hundred spirit stones. Even the most excellent first-order high-grade instruments usually sell for no more than 1,000 spirit stones. In short, according to Qin Daoxian's survey results in the morning, it is very promising to open a magic tool shop in Sangxiafeng City to sell magic tools. Moreover, compared with the difficulty of purchasing and leasing stores in the core business district, it does not exist in Sangxiafeng City. Along the way, he even saw that several shops were vacant for lease and sale. The reason is that the scattered repairers who set up stalls on the street have seized a lot of business from the store. If the things in the store are good value for money, the key stores sell only some second-hand goods and defective products. As a result, the loose cultivators might as well try their luck at the street stalls, at least the prices there are cheap. If you are lucky, you might be able to find a little treasure at a low price from a loose repair seller who doesn't know the goods. After investigating the magic weapon shop in Sangxiafeng City, the time has come to noon, and thinking that there are still a few hours left for the appointment with Chen Xinhe, Qin Daoxian simply went to the largest street market in Sangxiafeng City. Enter the street market. Qin Daoxian had the illusion of visiting a flea market in his previous life. If it weren't for the objects placed on the stalls being all kinds of magic talismans, array plates, and spiritual mines used by monks, he would still have the feeling of returning to the earth in a dream. Shaking his head and throwing out the unrealistic thoughts in his mind, Qin Daoxian identified a stall and walked over. "Fellow?" Qin Daoxian bowed his hands to the scattered cultivator who set up the stall. "I don't know how you sold this array." The loose cultivator who set up the stall was a middle-aged man with a beard, and he looked rather simple and honest. The bearded middle-aged stall owner saw that there were guests coming, so he quickly stood up from the futon where he was meditating, rubbed his hands and said, "You have good eyesight. This disc is called the Wind and Thunder Formation, and it carries a small wind and thunder formation. Taoist friends set up a large array of wind and thunder in a radius of 10 feet, which can trap and kill the enemy, and has a certain protective effect. It can be said to be a quite comprehensive magic weapon." He pointed to a gossip array with cracks on the surface. "Benefit 100 spiritual stones." The bearded stall owner stretched out a finger and said with a smile. Hearing this, Qin Daoxian said calmly, "Can I try it?" "Just try." The bearded middle-aged stall owner waved his hand in a rather grand manner. Qin Daoxian nodded, picked up the wind and thunder array plate and injected a burst of infuriating energy. Who knows, this wind and thunder array disc, which was blown away by the bearded stall owner, flashed a few times and then suddenly went out. Not only that, the entire array disc simply shattered directly along the crack, turned into a mass of slag and fell on the ground. Qin Daoxian. Bearded stall owner. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. Qin Daoxian wanted to buy this array plate entirely out of interest in the array plate type magic weapon that was not recorded in the family's inheritance of the artifact refining. I didn't expect that a dignified artifact refiner would slap him in the eye. This is not a slightly damaged magic tool at all, but a magic tool that is on the verge of being scrapped. The bearded stall owner in front of him is clearly fishing. Sure enough, the bearded stall owner saw that Qin Daoxian had destroyed his magic weapon, and immediately shouted righteously, "What do you mean, fellow Taoist? Why did you destroy my magic weapon worth 100 spirit stones for no reason?" Unexpectedly, fellow Taoist would do such a thing at such a young age with a dignified appearance. Soon. The loud voice of the bearded stall owner attracted the attention of the surrounding pedestrians and stall owners, and everyone gradually gathered around and pointed to watch the excitement. "This Zhang San is cheating again. This little fellow Taoist looks quite eye-catching, and there is a good show to watch." There is also a chi refining cultivator who has a slightly higher cultivation level and said, "Zhang San, I'm afraid that 100 spirit stones in your array is not enough, at least 1,000 spirit stones are needed." The bearded stall owner named Zhang San was very annoyed when he heard someone coaxing him to demolish his booth. He followed the voice and found that it was a nearby stall owner Wei Laogray, who was on the 9th floor of Qi refining and immediately died. With the intention of retreating in his heart, Zhang San's mouth was not so hard, but he waved his hand and said in a generous manner, forget it, judging from your young age, I'm afraid you are also a newcomer. The younger generation of Shintu, I will not be difficult for you. With a pretentious gesture, Zhang San continued, besides, I agree to let you try the wind and thunder array disc and I also have half the responsibility for this matter, so let's go, you compensate me for 50 spirit stones and this matter is exposed. How? After speaking, put on a look like you are taking advantage. Qin Daoxian almost laughed at his rogue appearance, shook his head and said, no way. Hey you kid, I told you not to toast, not to eat and drink fine. The bearded man threatened, don't think I can't teach you a lesson in Guang'an Mansion. After talking, he rolled up his sleeves and tried to teach Qin Daoxian a lesson. Who knows that Qin Daoxian looked at him quietly, unmoved. Seeing him like this, the bearded man named Zhang San was sitting on the wax instead. Taking action in Xianxing of Guang'an Mansion means provoking the Zhou family of Guang'an Mansion and giving the bearded stall owner 180 courage, and he does not dare to do so. This time it is not for him to do it and it is not for him to not do it. It is a dilemma. Coupled with the constant booing of the people around him, Zhang San felt like he was riding a tiger. The scene is deadlocked. Soon the disciples of the Zhou family patrolling and law enforcement rushed over. Let it go. Let it go. Let Jean. The law enforcement team is here. Give way. For a moment, 2 monks from the Zhou family law enforcement team, who were wearing azure robes from the fire spirit orb, pushed aside the crowd and squeezed in. What's the matter? What are you two doing? Seeing the cultivator of the law enforcement team, the bearded stall owner's face suddenly changed, and he hurriedly begged for mercy. It's okay, I'm just kidding with this little brother. Is that right? The cultivator of the law enforcement team looked at Qin Daoxian and asked. Qin Daoxian glanced at the bearded stall owner, saw his expression begging for mercy and nodded. We had a little dispute over the price of the magic weapon, nothing major. The cultivator of the law enforcement team was unwilling to pursue further investigations. Before leaving, the older cultivator of the law enforcement team warned the bearded stall owner, Zhang San, don't cause trouble here, otherwise your luck will not be as good as last time. Yes. Zhang San shings. Nodding and bowing, Zhang San sent the 2 law enforcement cultivators away. Seeing that there was no lively watching, the crowd gradually dispersed, and the surrounding stalls resumed their clamoring. Brother, thank you just now. The bearded stall owner bowed his hands to Qin Daoxian solemnly. Don't rush to thank me, let me ask you, where did you get this wind and thunder array plate? Qin Daoxian asked, pointing to the debris on the ground. Chapter 18. Hearing this, the embarrassed look on the bearded stall owner's face disappeared in a flash. After a while, he shook his head. Sorry, it's inconvenient for me to tell friends about this. But. The bearded stall owner paused. If you read it right, fellow Taoist shouldn't be a loose cultivator, right? Oh. Qin Daoxian became interested when he heard this and said non-committally, how did fellow Taoist see it? In the situation just now, if a budding loose cultivator would have panicked, I see that fellow Taoist is not afraid, obviously he has extraordinary confidence. Dao Yu is so confident at such a young age. I think you must be a descendant of which family, but you don't know whether you are from the Wu family, the Zhao family or the Yang family. Although this bearded man named Zhang San has a rough appearance, his mind is very delicate. At this moment he actually inquired about the origin of Qin Daoxian. The 3 immortal cultivating families he just mentioned were the most famous foundation building families except the Zhou family in the sea area of 100,000 miles. Qin Daoxian shook his head. You don't need to ask, my fellow Taoist, I am not from a foundation building family, but a child of a small family, which is nothing to be concerned about. Broken by Qin Daoxian, Zhang San's face showed embarrassment. Thought for a while. As if he had made up his mind, the bearded man whispered in Qin Daoxian's ear, Did you like the refining method of the wind and thunder array? Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was overjoyed, but he didn't expect that there would be an unexpected harvest. There is indeed some interest. In recent years, our family intends to train a refiner, and is about to collect the refining methods of various types of instruments. Hearing this, Zhang San couldn't help but be in awe. A family that can cultivate a refiner is a big family that is not weak. After all, It is not so easy to collect a piece of artifact refinement inheritance. Ordinary Qi refining families simply do not have the strength to train artifact refiners. Thinking of this, Zhang San's tone became a little more humble. Don't be surprised, fellow Taoist, I just went down to Menglang. Having said that, Zhang Sanchao bowed deeply to Qin Daoxian. Qin Daoxian naturally wouldn't care about what happened just now, otherwise he wouldn't have let him go when the Zhou family law enforcement cultivator was there. In return, Zhang San also knows how to choose at this moment. He saw that he took out a jade slip from the storage bag and said through voice transmission, "Fellow Taoist, please see, this is the refining method of the wind and thunder array." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian took the jade slip into his hands and used his divine sense to probe it. The next moment, a large amount of information about refining the array disk instrument poured into Qin Daoxian's sea of knowledge. It's just that Qin Daoxian was extra cautious this time because he was cheated once. After careful identification, he found that what was recorded in this jade slip should be true. Qin Daoxian said calmly, "I don't know what the price of this jade slip is." Hearing this, Zhang San raised 5 fingers. "I think fellow Taoist buys it sincerely, one price, 500 spirit stones." After speaking, the loose cultivator named Zhang San looked at Qin Daoxian nervously. 500 spirit stones were a huge amount of wealth for a Qi refining stage loose cultivator, so Zhang San couldn't be more nervous. If it was outside Guang'an Mansion, many monks would take risks for this money. Seeing Zhang San's appearance as a thief, Qin Daoxian nodded, "Yes." 500 spirit stones purchased a refining method for an array of instruments, which was not a loss for him. Possibly loose cultivators would not buy this method of refining, but for Qin Daoxian, who is determined to grow the family, adding heritage to the family is something that will never lose money. The two discussed it and deliberately chose to go to the inn to open a room to complete the transaction. Zhengda Guangming trades in the street market. Don't say that Zhang San didn't dare, Qin Daoxian didn't dare either. 500 spirit stones are not a small number, they can be piled up into a hill if they are placed on the ground. In line with the principle that more is worse than less, both of them carefully choose to trade in the inn. After Zhang San finished the transaction, he bowed to Qin Daoxian and left the Sangxiafeng city. With such a large sum of spiritual stones, Zhang San feels more guilty than anyone else at the moment. After all, in terms of cultivation he is only a little higher than Qin Daoxian, and he is only at the 4th level of Qi refining. On the other side, Qin Daoxian was in a very good mood. It took only half a day to come to Loose Cultivation Square City, and I obtained a method of refining magic weapons that is usually difficult to see. And it is not the common offensive and defensive magic weapons, but an auxiliary magic weapon such as the array disc. With this good mood, Qin Daoxian made persistent efforts and continued to visit the street market. Walking to the place where Zhang San had just set up the stall, this place was already occupied by another loose cultivator. Shook his head. Qin Daoxian continued to walk forward. Qin Daoxian didn't stop until he walked in front of a black-robed old man with a withered face. The cultivator in front of him had the impression that when he had a conflict with Zhang San just now, it was the black-robed old man who kept fighting against Zhang San. In a sense, it was a relief for Qin Daoxian. Compared to Zhang San's Philistine enthusiasm, the black-robed old man had a cold breath. Even if Qin Daoxian stood in front of him, he just pretended not to see it, and continued to sit on the futon with his eyes closed and meditate silently. Due to the cultivator's long-term seclusion and practice, his personality is easy to be withdrawn and strange, and Qin Daoxian is not surprised by this. "Senior, I don't know how you sold this water spirit pearl?" Seeing a spirit bead exuding pure water aura on the booth, Qin Daoxian asked with a face full of surprise. Shui Lingzhu is a unique cultivation resource that is abundant in the Zhou family of Lingbei Island. This spiritual bead has the effect of filtering and purifying spiritual energy. In other words, if the monk absorbs the aura that has been filtered and purified by the water spirit beads, the efficiency of refining the aura will be greatly increased, thereby speeding up the cultivation speed. Of course, this kind of baby also has a time limit. Generally speaking, a first-order water spirit pearl can only be used for a month at most, and it will lose the effect of purifying spiritual energy and become an ordinary pearl. Under normal circumstances, it is difficult for this kind of treasure to fall into the hands of loose cultivators. Basically, it is ordered in advance by major families. I don't know how the old man in front of him got it. Hearing Qin Daoxian's question, the black-robed old man opened his wrinkled eyes and said coldly, 100 spirit stones, I want bargain. Ah. Qin Daoxian, who was full of joy at first, was stunned when he heard these words. According to the market price, the first-order water spirit beads cultivated by the Zhou family only need 50 spirit stones, and the black-robed old man in front of him directly doubled it. No wonder people come and go for so long and no one buys it. It's not a premium anymore, it's a robbery. It may be that it has been placed for too long and no one has bought it. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's expression of regret, the black-robed old man explained, "Little friend, please see clearly, this water spirit bead is a top-grade first-order spirit bead. Although 100 spirit stones are a little more expensive, the water spirit beads are treasured, and it is normal for them to be at a premium." Hearing this, Qin Daoxian was suspicious. After all, he had never seen the water spirit beads sold by the Zhou family. He could recognize this beads because 13th uncle told him about the characteristics of this kind of spirit beads. "Whatever, little friend." Seeing that Qin Daoxian was still hesitating, the old man who was not good at sales simply closed his eyes and didn't ask any more questions. "Okay, 100 spirit stones are 100 spirit stones. Shui Lingzhu is difficult to buy. If it is true as the old man said, it is not too disadvantageous, and the talented old man can be considered to be outdone for Qin Daoxian, and buying him a Lingzhu at a premium is also considered to be his help." Just when the two-person deal was just completed. Woo-woo! A shrill siren suddenly rang through the entire immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture. Chapter 19. Listen to the shrill and urgent alarm sound in the ear. Qin Daoxian raised his head unconsciously. "Senior, this is..." "It's the siren of the monster attacking Guang'an Prefecture." The black-robed old man who had been sitting cross-legged stood up and said solemnly, "Monster attacking the city?" Hearing this, Qin Daoxuan's face suddenly became ugly. Obviously, this sentence evoked a not-so-good memory in his heart. Back then, Chongping County, Jianghu Island, was attacked by monsters. All his parents in this life were killed by monsters. If he hadn't been fortunate enough to be rescued by his 13th uncle, Qin Xianhe, he would have long since returned to the ghost. Therefore, when he heard that Guang'an Mansion was attacked by monsters, Qin Daoxuan's first reaction was not fear, but deep hatred. Seeing that Qin Daoxian was in a feigned mood, the old man seemed to mistakenly think that he was afraid, so he comforted, "Don't worry, it has not been a day or two since Guang'an Mansion was attacked by monsters, just get used to it." Hear this. Qin Daoxian was quite surprised. "Senior, why is this? Isn't Guang'an House the domain of the Zhou family? With the strength of the Zhou family, how could it be harassed by monsters?" Hearing this, the old man pointed to the water spirit pearl in Qin Daoxuan's hand. "Have you ever heard of the merman?" Hearing this, Qin Daoxian remembered a description of the merman clan he had read in the family's ancient books. There are sharks in the South China Sea who live in the deep sea. Their voices confuse people's minds, they are good at raising spirit shells, and they are good at controlling sea beasts. However, he has always regarded the records in the ancient books as legends, and he never thought that there were really mermaids in this world. Qin Daoxian replied, "I have seen it in ancient books, but does this have anything to do with the monster's harassment of Guang'an Mansion? Could it be related to this water spirit bead?" Seeing the black-robed old man pointing at the water spirit pearl in his hand, Qin Daoxian had a faint guess in his heart. "You guessed right." The black-robed old man nodded. "It's because of this spirit bead. Lingbei Island is the largest Lingbei farm in the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture, but if you want to breed Lingbei you must capture female sharks. Every year, the Zhou family's mercenary fleet will catch female mermen in the nearby waters. It seems that this year the Zhou family has stabbed the hornet's nest of which merman tribe." Speaking of this, the black-robed old man's tone revealed a hint of schadenfreude. Loose cultivators have always been hostile to the immortal clan, not because they are not used to it, but because the immortal clan occupies too many cultivation resources, and the two sides are in deep conflict. If it wasn't for Qianyuan Jianzong's choice to attack the country of Yunyun and transfer this contradiction, it might be that Wan Xinghai would have been in chaos now. Qin Daoxian couldn't care less about gloating, and he immediately remembered that his Canglong cargo ship was still moored at the port of Guang'an. Since this monster came from the sea, wouldn't their family's cargo ship bear the brunt of the disaster? Thinking of this, Qin Daoxian said goodbye. "Senior, this junior is one step ahead and the junior's boat is still at the port. Just now, I would like to thank the senior for rescuing the siege." Hearing Qin Daoxian mentioning the cargo ship, the black-robed old man slapped his thigh. "Oops, the old man's ship is parked there too. No wonder he was in a hurry." The ship of the black-robed old man is much higher grade than the cargo ship of the Chen family on Jianghu Island. It was he who spent a lot of money to find a spiritual boat ordered by the Yang family of the foundation building family. It cost him more than 800 spiritual stones. Can you be in a hurry? Thinking of this, the black-robed old man didn't care about Qin Daoxian, and immediately put the stall into the storage bag, used the wind control technique, and flew towards the outer city of Guang'an. Not only him, all the other monks who reacted rose up from the sky and flew towards the outer city of Guang'an Mansion. Due to the attack of the monsters, the forbidden air formation in the immortal city of Guang'an Prefecture had already been revoked for the first time. This moment, Qin Daoxian saw the most spectacular scene he had ever seen in this life. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators in Guang'an Prefecture flew towards the harbor of Guang'an Prefecture. This scene can be described as obscuring the sun. Ignoring his emotions, Qin Daoxian followed the crowd and flew towards the harbor. When Qin Daoxian found his ship, he found that Uncle 13 was already standing on the deck of the Canglong. Uncle 13. Qin Daoxian lowered his body and bowed to Qin Xianhe. Seeing his nephew, Qin Xianhe nodded with a smile, and then looked at the black monsters on the sea in the distance with a serious face, and said with a little worry, "The mermaid tribe that the Zhou family has provoked this time does not seem to be small." Qin Daoxian glanced at the sea, but he was not too worried. After these days of understanding, he knew how terrifying the strength of the Zhou family in Guang'an. Although the number of monsters in front of them is large, if you look closely, you will find that they are all low-level monsters. Not to mention the Zhou family of Guang'an Prefecture. Even if the loose cultivators of Guang'an Prefecture join forces, they can easily kill them. After all, although there are many monsters, there are more scattered cultivators. And the per capita strength far exceeds these monsters. Glancing at Qin Daoxian, Qin Xianhe instructed uneasy. Such a huge group of monsters, the Zhou family cultivator will definitely not be able to completely resist. If there is a fish that slips through the net, you remember not to rush to kill the front, just protect the family's cargo ship. That's it. He is not afraid that the monsters that slip through the net will hurt Qin Daoxian. After all, most of these monsters are low-level monsters. With Qin Daoxian's strength, it is more than enough to deal with them. He was just afraid that Qin Daoxian would be young and energetic for a while and rushed into the group of monsters. By that time, once the infuriating energy is exhausted, even the monsters that do not reach the rank may pose a life-threatening threat to the monks. With the continuous arrival of the black monks, the two sides actually confronted each other on the long and narrow coastline of Guang'an Prefecture. Looking at the group of cultivators who could not see the side at a glance, Qin Xian and his uncle and nephew suddenly felt at ease. Since their cargo ships were parked farther in, there were still a lot of cargo ships standing in front of them. At this moment, these cargo ships had all become their natural barriers. Although the monks standing in the front were scolding their mothers, in order to protect their own cargo ships, they could only smash their teeth and swallow them. Of course. At the forefront is the Zhou family cultivator. After all, Guang'an Prefecture is their territory, and it is their duty to protect the tranquility of Guang'an Prefecture. Not to mention that this disaster was caused by his Zhou family. In a relaxed mood, Qin Xianhe couldn't help but tease. It seems that the Yang family is going to smile crookedly this time. The Yang family in his mouth is the largest foundation building family in the 100,000-mile sea area, and its status is only below the Zhou family in Guang'an Prefecture. Seeing that Qin Daoxian had doubts, Qin Xianhe explained, "The Yang family is the largest merchant of cargo ships in the nearby waters, and our family's Canglong was purchased from the Yang family shipping company. This time the monster attacked, I am afraid that many Taoist friends' cargo ships will be damaged. How could his Yang family not laugh?" The voice just fell. A piercing shriek pierced the sky. Ow. Hearing this scream, Qin Daoxian only felt his heart pounding, and then he felt like he wanted to vomit. Seeing this, Qin Daoxian hurriedly used his Dantian infuriating energy to suppress the feeling of vomiting. When he was done, he glanced at Qin Xianhe and found that Uncle 13 was as pale as himself. "This is a high-level merman," Qin Xianhe said with a sullen face. "What disaster did the Zhou family cause this time?" Chapter 20. Accompanied by this scream that pierced the sky, the monsters on the sea line in the distance, as if going crazy, rushed towards Guang'an Mansion. Due to the huge number of monsters, a tsunami was even triggered. Seeing the terrifying power of the tsunami, all the monks present changed their color. Frontline position. At this moment, the Zhou family cultivators who were at the forefront were all sinking like water. The Zhou family never imagined that they were only capturing the merman as in previous years. Why this time it caused such a big trouble? No matter how. The Mare people are all calling, and it is impossible for the Zhou family to retreat. Otherwise, the prestige that the Zhou family has built in the sea area with a radius of 100,000 miles for thousands of years will be destroyed. Think of this. One of the leading monks from the Zifu shouted loudly, "The disciples of the Zhou family obey the order and form a formation to defend against the enemy. Fall with the order." In less than half a cup of tea, a super-large formation was arranged in front of the coastline. All the Zhou family members held their breaths, waiting for the onslaught of monsters. Sword formation. Get up. With a single order, the flying swords pierced the sky, forming a powerful sword formation, killing the surging monster beasts. Now, it seems that only the surging monsters and the dazzling sword array are left in this world. Boom, in a blink. The sword formation and the tsunami collided together, and a loud noise like the collision of heaven and earth broke out. In just a moment, the sea water was dyed into blood, and large corpses of monsters floated on the sea surface. This scene was also seen by the loose cultivators in the back, and everyone's expressions relaxed. Low-level monsters are low-level monsters. Even if the number is staggering, it won't make any waves. Chen Xinhe, who was floating in the air, sighed with emotion when he saw the Zhou family cultivator fighting against the monsters in the sea. The Zhou family is really strong. What Chen Daoxian saw was the strength of the Zhou family, which was not only reflected in the strength of the Zhou family's children alone. It is even more reflected in the fact that the children of the Zhou family are well trained as a whole, and they are completely different from the loose cultivators who can only show their courage. At the moment, the strongest wave of the monster beasts' attack was defeated by the Zhou family, and only the strangulation of the scattered monster beasts was left. I saw these slaughtered monsters fleeing. No matter how desperately the mermen behind them howled and commanded, it was of no use at all. 1. Seeing this scene, the battle-hardened Chen Xinhe instantly judged the situation. Really? As Chen Xinhe judged, the seemingly huge number of monsters were not the enemies of the Zhou family. In just one collision, the army collapsed. Next, it was the Zhou family cultivator and the Guang'an mansion scattered cultivator to clean up the scattered monsters. Compared to defeating the huge group of monsters, this cleanup work seems to be more troublesome. Because these monsters are so capable of running around, the Zhou family cultivator must ensure that not a single fish slips through the net. Otherwise, if the monsters enter the Guang'an Mansion River, they may pose a great threat to the Zhou family mortals. After all, compared with monks, mortals have no self-protection power in the face of monsters. Even the mortal warriors of the 9th level congenital are very likely to be killed when facing these inexperienced monsters, let alone those mortals who do not know martial arts. Fortunately, there are sailboats all over the harbor of Guang'an Prefecture. At this moment, these sailboats have become the natural protective barrier of Guang'an Prefecture. It is almost impossible for the scattered monsters to cross these ships and enter the inland waterway of Guang'an Prefecture. On the Canglong, Chen Daoxian and Chen Xinhe stood side by side. Originally, Chen Daoxian thought that he could kill a monster with his own hands, but now it seems that they will be watching this battle too. Although it is impossible to count the number of monsters. But one thing is certain, there are absolutely not many monks present. In addition, most of the monsters were killed by the Zhou family cultivators, and it was their turn to take action. One can imagine how many are left. Seeing Chen Daoxian's eager expression, Chen Xinhe smiled and said, "Most of these are monsters that are not in the mainstream. Even if they are beheaded, the corpses will not be of much use to me and other monks, so why waste the effort?" Chen Daoxian smiled, "I know, but it's just a little itchy." Hearing this, Chen Xinhe was speechless. The monks practice in seclusion all the year round. Kong, you have a powerful power but cannot use it. After a long time, it will cause problems. This is also the reason why monks often fight fiercely if they disagree. To use the words of the previous life to describe it, it is self-inflicted with a sharp knife to kill. What's more, the cultivator is no longer armed with a sharp blade, but has the power to destroy the sky and the earth. Can he not be grumpy? Chen Xinhe was about to say something when the Canglong suddenly shook. No, it's a tiger-eye fish. Chen Xinhe swept away his senses, and found a strange fish about Zhanglong with a blood-colored four-eyed head, ramming and biting the hull of the Canglong. Good beast. Seeing this beast destroying the family's only cargo ship, the Canglong, how could Chen Xinhe bear it? Wow. The sword glow on the flying sword shone, and it only made a circle in the sea before breaking out of the water. The next second, the impact of the Tsanglong stopped. After a while, a stream of blood swelled up from the sea, and the corpse of the monster Qin Xinhe called the tiger-eye fish came to the surface. Qin Daoxian took a closer look. This monster named tiger-eyed fish has been broken into 2 pieces. After thinking about it, Qin Daoxian used his true energy to take the tiger-eye corpse from the sea and hung it in front of him to observe it carefully. This was the first time he had observed the monsters so carefully. In the chaos of monsters in Chongping County 10 years ago, he was only concerned with fear, and he didn't see what the monsters looked like at all. Is this a monster? It's really weak, Qin Daoxian muttered. After hearing this, Qin Xian's face became serious and he shook his head. The monster is not weak. This tiger-eye fish is not so much a monster as a monster infected with monster power and turned into a monster. The real first-order monsters are not so easy to deal with. Speaking of this, Qin Xinhe seemed to have remembered something and warned, if you encounter a monster with a fellow cultivator alone in the future, remember not to fight with it. Ordinary monks fight alone, and it is difficult to be an opponent of monsters. Qin Daoxian nodded, indicating that he remembered it. He knew that in terms of experience, Uncle 13, an old fritter in the world of immortality, didn't know how many streets he had left behind. Seeing Qin Daoxian's regretful look, Qin Xinhe said angrily, "Don't make a stinky face, let you kill the next monster, he'll give you the head office." Okay. Qin Daoxian nodded with a smile, and then threw the corpse of the tiger-eye into the sea. As soon as Qin Xinhe finished speaking, a monster with a strong demonic aura swam towards the position of the Tsanglong. First-order monster. Not far away there were also monks who discovered the monsters in the sea and exclaimed, "Damn, what did the Zhou family and the people in front do? How did they let the first-order monsters come over?" The monks around were complaining. Seemingly attracted by the blood of the tiger fish, this first-order monster swam near the Tsanglong, but didn't leave and began to eat the body of the tiger fish. The Tsanglong is about 50 feet long, which is about 160 meters. Although it is not a big cargo ship, it is a behemoth compared to a monster like the tiger-eye. However, the first-order monster in front of him, just the length of its back exposed on the sea surface, exceeded the mast of the Tsanglong. The length of its whole body is probably more than 20 feet. This is the largest creature Qin Daoxian has ever seen. Because of his nature, Rao couldn't help but feel a sense of panic. Fortunately, this monster was eating, and it seemed that he had no intention of attacking the Tsanglong for a while. Chapter 21. C. Qin Xinhe was also nervous. The body of the tiger-eye fish was only 10 feet tall, and with the size of this first-order monster, it would not take too long to eat it. I thought that this time I was just following the Zhou family and shouting, but I didn't expect to encounter such a crisis. Thinking of this, Qin Xinhe instructed, "This monster should not be able to fly. If it is lost later, just abandon the ship and escape." At this time, Qin Daoxian would not be able to show his power. After all, his cultivation was just at the 3rd level of qi refining. Even if he had experienced 3 epiphanies on the way to Guang'an Mansion, and the wind-chasing sword art had reached the realm of transcendence, it might not be enough to deal with this huge monster. Unless he is willing to use the trump card of Fei Shue's sword. However, using the flying snow sword would consume too much jinqi. Once he fails to build meritorious deeds, he might even lose his ability to escape if his jinqi is exhausted, which would be a tragedy. Hesitating, a familiar voice entered the ears of Qin Daoxian and others. "Everyone, this is the blood-spotted sea snake, a late-stage first-order monster, and its cultivation base is equivalent to that of a late-stage qi-refining monk. If it is not stopped in time with the destructive power of this monster, our ship will soon be destroyed." It's destroyed. While speaking, an old man in a black robe floated in the air. Qin Daoxian recognized at a glance that this person was the black-robed old man who sold his Shui Lingzhu in Sangxiafang City. Unexpectedly, his cargo ship was also nearby. After listening to the narration of the black-robed old man, everyone understood that the only way to save their own ship was to kill the blood-spotted sea snake. So, including the black-robed old man, the 7 nearby qi-refining cultivators reached an agreement to slay this monster together. Among the 7 qi-refining cultivators, only the black-robed old man had reached the 9th level of qi-refining. As for the others, the highest-level qi-refining cultivator was Qin Xinhe, a mid-level qi-refining cultivator. It's really hard to say whether such a temporary team can kill this monster. However, for the sake of their own cargo ships, these loose cultivators with clean faces have no choice. Glancing at everyone, he seemed to recognize Qin Daoxian. After the black-robed old man nodded slightly to him, he set up a tactic to kill the blood-spotted sea snake. Everyone, the blood-spotted sea snake is not only huge, but also a common poisonous snake in the sea. When you kill the demon later, remember to take the detoxification pill in advance. Hearing this, a cultivator who was only on the second level of qi refining said with an embarrassed expression, "Senior, I'm here. I don't have an antidote." Hearing this, the black-robed old man took out a bottle of jade, took out a green transparent pill from it, and bounced it into the hands of the cultivator on the second floor of qi refining. "Thank you for the gift of seniors." The black-robed old man nodded, glanced at everyone and said, "Who else doesn't have a detoxification pill?" I didn't." "And I." Everyone opened their mouths. In the end, except for Qin Xian and his uncle and nephew, there was no such thing as a detoxification pill in this temporary team. Of course. It may not be that everyone has it, maybe some people just want to take advantage of the black-robed old man. The black-robed old man also knew this kind of thinking, but he had to pay such a price in order to protect his valuable cargo ship. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to kill this blood-spotted sea snake alone. After a pause, the black-robed old man continued, "Later this old man will use his ice-binding technique with all his strength, at least to trap this beast for 3 breaths. So you can take advantage of this interval to join forces to kill the monster, no problem, right?" Seeing that someone was willing to take the lead, everyone naturally had no different opinions and nodded in agreement. After reaching an agreement, the black-robed old man did not talk nonsense, and immediately performed the ice-binding technique. With the casting of the spell, everyone saw a huge ice vine nearly 100 feet long roused from the hand of the black-robed old man, directly freezing the blood-spotted sea snake that was eating in the sea. The power of ice binding is amazing, not only freezing the monsters but also freezing the nearby sea water into ice. "Don't do it yet." The black-robed old man blushed and shouted loudly. Before he could speak, Qin Daoxian took the lead and took out the red shadow flying sword and slashed towards the frozen monster. Under the blessing of Deshang wind-chasing sword art, the red shadow flying sword was full of sword light, exuding a terrifying power which attracted Qin Xian's eyes. "This is Deshang Realm's wind-chasing sword art." Qin Xinhe was shocked. Even Qin Daoxuan's attainment of the wind-chasing sword art seems to be higher than his, but how is this possible? He clearly remembered that his nephew obviously got the wind-chasing sword art from him before he came to Guang'an Mansion. In just 1 month he actually cultivated this sword technique to the realm of Deshang? And it's not the usual Deshang realm. Impossible. Qin Xinhe only had this thought in his mind, so distracted, his sword speed was a little slower. Others don't know what Qin Xinhe is thinking. Everyone tried their best to attack the blood-spotted sea snake with their housekeeping skills. Atom. In this space, sword lights flicker, fireballs fly, electric lights gallop. It does look impressive. And actually, except for a few people such as Qin Daoxian and Qin Xinhe, who can cause a little damage to the blood-spotted sea snake. Due to the low cultivation base and the poor quality of the instruments, it is difficult for other monks to do any damage to this late first-order blood-spotted sea snake. The most exaggerated one is the second-level qi refining cultivator with the lowest cultivation base in the team. He seems to have a limited level of magic, and the magic tool he uses is a black iron flying sword that he has made and refined himself. When Qin Daoxian saw this flying sword, he was almost stunned. For a long time he used loose cultivators' casual refining of black iron as a magic weapon as a joke. It was not quite realistic that someone actually did this. When the second-level qi refining cultivator ordered Xian Tai Feijian to slash the body of the blood-spotted sea snake, he didn't even cut its skin, leaving only a string of sparks, which really shocked everyone. See this scene. The black-robed old man was anxious and angry. He kept scolding everyone for being trash, but there was no good way to do it. He needed to keep injecting true qi into the ice compress to trap this ferocious sea snake. Otherwise, when the blood-spotted sea snake broke out of the ice, even if everyone could fly to escape their lives, everyone's ships would definitely be destroyed by the mad blood-spotted sea snake. This is absolutely unbearable for the black-robed old man. Kakaka. Perhaps because he was concerned about the situation of the battle, the black-robed old man injected his true qi a little slower. The ice layer that had frozen the blood-spotted sea snake actually cracked. Not good. This beast is about to get out of trouble. Everyone will do their best, otherwise all our ships will not be saved. The voice just fell. The ice on the blood-spotted sea snake's tail was the first to break up. I saw a cylindrical black shadow breaking out of the ice on the sea surface, and Qin Daoxin could even see the blood-colored markings on the tail the size of a human head. Boom! The giant tail of the blood-spotted sea snake hit a cargo ship next to the Canglong. Immediately the cargo ship was smashed by the monster, and it was broken into 2 pieces. Countless sawdust stumps floated in the sea. Ah, my ship. Death beast. Death. One of the monks in the team was mad when he saw this, and sent Fei Jin to attack the blood-spotted sea snake like a madman. It's just that his cultivation is only at the 3rd level of qi refining, coupled with the insufficient power of the flying sword. No matter how angry he is, how much damage can he cause to this monster? See this scene. Qin Daoxuan's face was dark, and Qin Xinhe is even more resigned. In his eyes, the Canglong is important, but it is far less than the safety of his nephew. If Qin Daoxin suffered any damage, it would be a blow to the Qin family on Jianghu Island. Thinking of this, Qin Xinhe shook his head slightly and gave Qin Daoxin a look, signaling him to step back in time. Qin Daoxin understood Qin Xian's eyes. But I thought that the trip would have to rely on the Canglong to transport materials. If there was no Canglong, not to mention the loss of spiritual stones, the process of returning home would be very troublesome. After weighing for a moment, Qin Daoxuan's eyes became firm. Uncle 13, I want to give it a try. Chapter 22, Give it a try? What kind of test? His nephew's Deshang realm's wind-chasing sword art was enough to shock Qin Xinhe. Now the other party actually said that he would kill this late first-order demon snake. How could Qin Xinhe believe it? Is trying to discourage. The roar of the black-robed old man resounded in everyone's ears again. Be careful everyone, this beast is about to get out of trouble. The voice just fell. On the snake body erected by the blood-spotted sea snake, the ice layer gradually cracked, and the ice chips fell on the sea surface, sputtering huge splashes of water. Hiss. The blood-spotted sea snake broke out with a terrifying neigh. Everyone only felt a cold air rushing to their foreheads, and Qin Xinhe even discovered that the 2nd-level qi-refining cultivator with the lowest cultivation level among the people was frightened by the power of this demonic snake and shivered. It's over. The black-robed old man screamed in his heart. But no matter how unwilling he is, at this moment there is only one way to escape. The blood-spotted sea snake shook its huge body, and countless ice chips either fell into the sea water or landed on the frozen sea, and the impact made a thumping sound. Seeing this monster snake is about to get out of trouble. When everyone is desperate, a sword light pierced the sky. The whole body of this sword is snow white, and the sword glow is nearly 10 feet wide. Even if they are separated by a distance of several hundred meters, everyone can feel the cold aura and terrifying power emanating from this flying sword. The sword glow is 9 feet. The first-order high-grade flying sword. Is this a first-order high-grade magic weapon? It's dead, the snake is dead. Die. Ah. When the black-robed old man saw this sword, there was a sense of fear in his heart. Obviously, the power of this sword is enough to threaten his life. No. Qin Daoxin only felt that the air in front of Fei Jin became extremely thick, as if something was preventing him from exerting all the power of Fei Jin. It's just that this feeling is fleeting. In the eyes of others, the flying snow sword is not only terrifying, but also as fast as a rainbow. Compared to them, Qin Daoxuan's flying sword was more than twice as fast. This is also the performance of wind-chasing sword art, after reaching the culmination level. Not only did the speed of flying the sword double after the sword, but the power increased by nearly 70%. The first-order high-grade Fei Shui sword, coupled with the wind-chasing sword art, which increases the power of the Fei Jian by 70%, created an amazing sword at the moment. Hiss. In the face of this sword, the blood-spotted sea snake that erected its snake body also felt a fatal threat, and I saw it twisting the snake body desperately, trying to avoid the edge of the flying snow sword. But it had just escaped from the ice-binding technique of the black-robed old man, and its body was still stiff at the moment, and the speed of the flying snow sword was too fast to allow it to dodge at all. Laugh. It sounded like a hot knife had cut through butter. The blood-spotted sea snake, which was more than 20 feet in length and about 10 feet in diameter, was cut off by Qin Daoxuan's sword. Seeing this scene, the black-robed old man was stunned for a moment, then overjoyed. After taking a sip of his Dantian qi, He immediately performed the ice binding technique again, freezing the remnant of the monster snake that was swaying indiscriminately because of the loss of its head. After half a cup of tea, as the last trace of the demon snake's vitality disappeared under the erosion of the ice binding technique, the sea finally calmed down again. "Do you died?" The second-floor chi refining cultivator with the lowest cultivation base asked cautiously. "Died." Chen Xinhe nodded, then looked at Chen Daoxian, who was pale with a complicated look on his face. "Great. Finally dead." Finally dead. "Haha, we succeeded, Madare." Except for the cultivator whose cargo ship was destroyed with a drooping face, everyone else cheered and rejoiced. After all, getting rid of the blood-spotted sea snake means not only the preservation of one's own cargo ship, but also an unexpected harvest. As a late-stage first-order monster, this blood-spotted sea snake can be said to be full of treasures. On the corpse left behind, in addition to the most precious inner pill and poison sac, snake meat can be used for eating, snake teeth can be used to create special instruments, and snake skin can be sewn into close-fitting defensive soft armor. Just now everyone was so focused on the firepower that they couldn't cause too much damage to this monster snake, and the snake skin accounted for at least 80% of the credit. Although the snake skin has been damaged a lot after being devastated by everyone, it is not a problem to sew into a few body-fitting soft armor. After the black-robed old man moved the corpse of the demon snake to his ship, he invited everyone to board his cargo ship. When everyone heard his invitation, they raised their spirits. Everyone knows that the time has come to divide the spoils. The cargo ship of the black-robed old man was 3 times larger than the Qin family's Canglong, and the formation patterns on the ship were much more than the Canglong. No wonder the black-robed old man was so nervous about his cargo ship. The crowd thought to themselves. Everyone? The black-robed old man didn't know what everyone was thinking. He was usually taciturn and his face was rosy at the moment, and he was obviously very satisfied with the results of this battle. According to the Division of Military Exploits in the Qinyuan Sword Sect, those who directly kill the enemy account for the main credit, and can enjoy 60% of the spoils. The black-robed old man looked around and finally set his eyes on Chen Daoxian. Rather than saying that he was asking everyone's opinions, it would be better to say that he was asking Chen Daoxian's opinions. After all, this is a world of immortal cultivation where the strong are respected. The strength Chen Daoxian had just burst out was enough for the black-robed old man to face him squarely. Everyone looked at each other and shook their heads. It's all up to the seniors. That's it. Seeing that everyone had no disagreement, the black-robed old man took out 100 spirit stones from the storage bag and distributed 20 spirit stones to each of the 5 Qin Xinhe. This snake demon corpse is barely worth 1,000 spirit stones. The 5 of you occupy 10%, that is, 20 spirit stones per person. Please count them. The black-robed old man arched his hands. In the crowd, except for the cultivator whose cargo ship was destroyed, the rest of the cultivators, especially the second-level chi refining cultivator, were all smiling. Obviously, 20 spirit stones were a lot of money for him, a second-level chi refining cultivator. After everyone put the spirit stone into the storage bag, they bid farewell to the black-robed old man. One by one they sent everyone away and the black-robed old man looked at Chen Daoxian. Fellow Taoist, let's meet again. It seems that the junior and the senior are still very faithful. Chen Daoxian smiled and said that he didn't hear the black-robed old man automatically upgrade his title from little friend to Taoist friend. The black-robed old man also laughed and said, "Don't lie to fellow Taoists, this time the old man has a ruthless request. Senior, please speak. I want to use the spirit stone to counteract the inner pill and poison sac of the demon snake. How about friendship?" After thinking about it, Chen Daoxian nodded. "Yes, but I don't want the spirit stone. I wonder if the seniors still have the water spirit beads that sold me today?" It seems that Chen Daoxian would ask this question. After all, although Chen Daoxian's strength is strong, his cultivation is only 3 levels of qi refining. For him, the Shui Lingzhu, which can accelerate the improvement of cultivation, is naturally more attractive than other foreign objects. But for the black-robed old man, the water spirit beads are a bit tasteless. He is now at the 9th level of qi refining. Unless he can break through to the foundation establishment stage, these treasures that improve his cultivation will have no effect on him. There are 5 water spirit beads here, the price is 500 spirit stones, and the remaining 100 spirit stones. How about giving this demon snake meat to fellow Taoists? The black-robed old man took out 5 marble-sized water beads and said, "Okay." Chen Daoxian nodded in agreement. Negotiate the loot division. The next step is to deal with the corpse of the snake demon. The three of them are monks, and the speed of disposing of the snake demon's corpse is very fast. In just one stick of incense, the snake demon is skinned and fleshed out. The snake meat and 5 water spirit beads belong to Qin Dao Xian, and the snake skin, snake teeth, poison sac, and inner pill belong to the black-robed old man. Chapter 23, Cargo Ship Deck. After experiencing the common defense against the enemy and the distribution of the spoils, the relationship between the three became visibly familiar to the naked eye. Qin Daoxian smiled and cupped his hands. Qin Daoxian, the younger generation of the Qin family in Chongping County, Jianghu Island. This is my uncle Qin Xianhe. I don't know the senior's name? Old Wei Sihai. I have seen 2 fellow Taoists. The black-robed old man Wei Sihai formally bowed to the 2 of them. Qin Xianhe and Qin Daoxian hurriedly returned the salute. Fellow Taoist Wei is welcome. Qin Xianhe put on a flattered look. He knew in his heart that if it wasn't for Qin Daoxuan's face, the other party probably wouldn't take him, the 6th-level chi-refining cultivator, in his eyes. After being polite, the relationship between the 2 sides became more harmonious. Qin Daoxian couldn't help but inquire about the rental and sale of shops in Sangxiafang City. Compared with Qin's uncle and nephew, Wei Sihai, who has been in Sangxiafang City all the year round, obviously knows the specific situation of Sangxiafang City better than them. Really? After listening to Qin Daoxuan's narration, Wei Sihai frowned, shook his head and said, I advise fellow Taoists not to break up the store in Xiaofang City. Why is this? Qin Xianhe on the side frowned. Wei Sihai looked at Qin Daoxian, then at Qin Xianhe, and explained, to tell the truth from the 2 fellow Taoists, the cultivation island where I am is also considered to have some spiritual mineral resources, but the old man has not yet opened a shop in Sangxiafang City. Do you 2 know why? Qin Daoxian and Qin Xianhe looked at each other, cupped their hands and said, I also ask seniors for advice. I can't talk about advice. The black-robed old man Wei Sihai waved his hand. The scattered repair shop in Guang'an Prefecture is different from the core business district. Most of the customers here are the children of scattered repairers and small families, and their purchasing power is weak. If you open a shop, the cost of goods will skyrocket. That being the case, why don't the scattered cultivators choose to buy on the pavement? As an old bird who has been in the Sangxiafang City all the year round, Wei Sihai's words can be said to be extremely sincere. If it wasn't for Qin Daoxuan's extraordinary potential and his intention to make friends, he would not have been so dissuaded. Hearing these words, combined with Qin Daoxuan's own market research on Sangxiafang City, he knew that Wei Sihai did not talk nonsense. It's just that Qin Sihai didn't know that he was an artifact refiner, and he didn't even know that he possessed an inter-era magical tool like the Rongling furnace. Think for a moment. Qin Daoxian decided to tell part of the truth. To be honest, this junior happens to be an artifact refiner, so he wants to open a magic artifact shop in Sangxiafang City. Friend Taoist is a refiner? The black-robed old man was stunned for a moment, and then his face became suspicious. Seeing that Wei Sihai was suspicious, Qin Daoxian did not explain, but showed a fire control technique in front of him. Fire control was one of the only 2 spells Qin Daoxian had mastered before he came to Guang'an Mansion, and he had long since cultivated to the realm of Deshang. I saw Qin Daoxuan's palm. The flames change into various forms, ranging from common cats and dogs to various birds and beasts. Seeing Qin Daoxuan's skilled fire control, Wei Sihai immediately believed 90% in his heart. Because apart from the alchemist and the alchemist, no one can master the fire control technique so skillfully. After all, cultivating the fire control technique is of no use to the increase of strength, but will consume a lot of energy. Except for the alchemist and the alchemist, no cultivator would be able to practice this spell. Fellow Taoist is actually an artifact refiner, disrespectful and disrespectful. If it was said that Wei Sihai just wanted to make friends with Qin Daoxian, then his attitude towards him now has a faint taste of flattery. After all, in the loose cultivator group, artifact refiners and alchemists are too rare. This kind of special talent is generally only capable of being cultivated by big families and sections. And on weekdays, the major forces protect them very closely, and ordinary loose cultivators simply cannot contact such people. It's just that Wei Sihai's character has always been more restrained, and he clearly wanted to say something flattering, but in the end only a dry disrespect. Qin Daoxian didn't care about this either. He revealed the secret of his artifact refiner in order to let Wei Sihai, an old bird from the loose cultivation city, introduce him to a reliable shop. Really? After learning the identity of Qin Daoxuan's craftsman, Wei Sihai introduced the shop information he had in detail. In the end he clapped his chest and said, "Don't worry, the two fellow Taoists. I'll introduce the shop owner to the two of you when we return to Fangshi later. This matter is covered by me. So, thank you seniors." Fellow Taoist is too polite. Just as a few people were talking, the battlefield on the distant front seemed to have a new change. Frontline battlefield. After the disciples of the Zhou family defeated the monsters and beasts, the mere people who were not reconciled to the defeat went off in person and launched an attack on the Zhou family. Thanks to the cultivator's amazing eyesight, and Qin Daoxuan's condescension. Even if they were separated by hundreds of miles, they could clearly see the appearance of those mermaids. As recorded in ancient books, the appearance of the merman is almost the same as that of the human race, and the males of the merman race are exceptionally strong with exposed muscles, which emit a bronze luster under the sunlight. The female sharks are beautiful and lovable, all of them are beautiful beauties. Of course, the premise is not to look below them. The mermen, regardless of gender, lost their human characteristics from the waist down, but instead kept a fish tail that was about 10 feet long. Seeing this scene, Wei Sihai couldn't help but sigh with emotion. It is said that the mere people have the blood of their ancestors. I didn't believe it before, but now that I see their appearance, it is not completely groundless. Qin Daoxuan doesn't care about whether he is a mermaid or a mermaid. Now he is only thinking about opening the shop in Sangxiafang City, and then letting Qin Xinhe sit in the shop. Then he went home to establish a workshop for refining tools, mass-produced magic tools, and used the productivity of industrialization to plunder the wealth of Wan Xinghai. As for the war between the shark and the Zhou family, who cares? Not to mention that the Zhou family easily crushed the incoming mermen. Even if the Zhou family couldn't win, wouldn't there be a prefecture above it? The state city has been defeated, and there is also the Qinyuan sword sect. In this world, the human race is the absolute overlord. In addition, neither monsters nor aliens can compete with the human monks. Otherwise, if there is a common foreign enemy, Qinyuan Jianzong will not fight to death with Izumo for 400 years. Conversation room. In the merman group, a middle-aged merman with an extremely strong figure and a resolute face stepped out of the group on the waves. Opposite. A handsome young man in a white robe with a face like a crown of jade stood in front of him. The man in white is tall and straight, with a 3-foot-long sword on his back, standing in the air. Even though he was separated by hundreds of miles, Qin Daoxuan could feel the indifferent aura emanating from the other party's body, as if he had been banished to the world. Who is that? Hearing this, Wei Sihai had a complicated look on his face. Guang'an Sword Immortal Zhoumu Bai. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.